Here we go, back on Monday Night Football. We've got a full studio, including a very special guest who we're going to get to very quickly because, as I've already let him know, we've more questions for him than anyone we've ever had on the show before.
Cheers, man.
Yes, it's our signed music artist of the week. Ross is here with us.
Hello.
And Scott is here with us as well.
Hello.
He managed to get that caller off the phone just in time to get here.
Aye, just a bit.
He was telling me before that he almost said, "Do you know who I've got to interview tonight?"
She wasn't too impressed. She was too busy asking where her Amazon package was.
Oh, there you go.
And who he has to interview tonight is Gowser himself, Ryan McGowan.
Hello guys, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ryan. You've travelled, I'd like to say you travelled a long way to be here, but you were kind of back already.
I did travel a long way.
Specifically to be here.
Flying back when after the show's
Found us on iTunes and decided, I've got something to do this Christmas. Okay, this is going to be a Rangers AGM free show tonight. We're not going to mention the gazebo, we're not going to mention that the badge fell off the table during the meeting or anything like that at all, although we sort of just have. We're going to get straight to Ryan McGowan. Gowser, are you comfortable? Happy?
I'm good, thank you.
Are you happy with the idea of us calling you Gowser for an hour?
That's okay.
We've noticed that even his Australian teammates, is it Gowser?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
People in the street, that's what freaks me out the most, because you think it's one of your mates and then you have no idea who it is, but it takes a bit of getting used to.
Let's get back to your schoolmates then, and let's talk a wee bit about your time before you came to Edinburgh, before you came to Hearts, and you're starting football in Australia. What's the youth football setup like in Australia?
At the moment, it's really good, but at the time when I was growing up, getting to your teenage years, we only had sort of part-time football. So I was lucky enough I was playing for a first team, the equivalent of Bonnyrigg Rose, at 14. So that made me a little bit in the public eye a little bit. And then for me, unless to join Adelaide United, which is the team of my hometown, you had to be in the first team. So they only signed 20 players. So unless you were in that, you had nothing really. So up until 16, I was just trying to get as many games and as many training sessions as I could before one night during the week I got a phone call to say, would I be interested in travelling over to Edinburgh to Hearts?
And it was always Hearts straight away. There was no other clubs in Britain that were mentioned at that stage or anything like that?
No, not at all. It was Dave McPherson, who he was the sort of connection point. He contacted an agent in Melbourne, who's still my agent, Lou Sticker, and asked if there was any players that sort of fitted my criteria that Lou Sticker knew, and he made a few phone calls, and next thing I was on a big plane over.
Have we again ever since?
Yeah, and that's quite a big commitment then for what you said. You were 16 at the time.
I was 16 and a half when the interest was first sort of known, and then it took about 4 months to sort of work out what was going on. I was obviously still at school and had to sort of get a few things organised. Didn't even have a passport, so I had to get my UK passport sorted, and then it was just before the 2006 Scottish Cup final, so we just came for the pre-season the following season, so there was no real point coming over with only a couple of weeks to go, so flew over not long into pre-season.
That was quite a mad pre-season, I think, as we all recall as well, because you weren't the only arrival at Riccarton in that summer. There was quite a few, especially trialists, who kind of came and went and things like that. What were your initial impressions of Riccarton when you got there?
I loved it. I've come from just amateur, pretty much amateur in Adelaide, to a professional setup where I think I was number 74 when I first arrived, so I was delighted. I had 74, I had a hard strip. I got to train with guys my age who all wanted the same ambitions, the same dreams, and for me that was just what I dreamed for since I was a young boy. So was there any trial period, or were you signed as soon as you came? Were you a contracted Hearts player as soon as you actually got to Riccarton? Yeah, they'd sort of offered me a contract before I flew over, but there's still that, if I came over and had a couple of stinkers, I think they would have just sent me back. But it did take me a little while to settle in. There's still a few boys that I used to play with that are very quick to remind me how bad I was when I first joined. It was difficult to start with. It was very difficult. Just turned 17, moving to a totally different country and trying to pick up with the pace of everything. But I think I settled in okay.
So your expectation at that point when you joined Hearts, though, was always that you were going into the under-19s team and you were really working your way up from there. There was never a thought that I'll come in 3 months I'll be in the first team and in the big time.
No, not at all. My dad and my family sort of drilled it in that I was going over to a country where every single kid, every boy, I think, wants to play professional football, and for an Australian boy to sort of come in and take those positions, you've got to be a lot better and want it a lot more than your sort of local boys. So I was under no illusions of what I was going into and what I had to do to try and break into the first team.
What was the makeup of that under-19s team that you joined in? Who were the big characters or the players that you clicked with when you entered that dressing room?
There was another Aussie boy there, Matthew Park, who I think he made a couple of appearances for the first team.
Yeah.
Rocky Visconti, who I came over with, and a couple of Irish boys, Sean Kelly, Sean Mackle, Johnny Taylor. They were sort of the ones, Eddie Mearns, Ross Hamilton, just sort of local guys, Johnny Stewart, who I'm still very good friends with at the moment. They were sort of the core players that sort of took me under the wing and even just showed me things like what bus to catch, what bus to go into town. It sounds stupid now, but as a 17-year-old boy coming to Edinburgh, I had no idea which way to go, what to do, how much a bus was, set up a bank account. There was a lot of things that I needed a lot of help for, and Hearts were very helpful in that way.
That takes me back to my football manager days and seeing the Hearts under 21 team, and it was all those names that he's mentioned.
And then building them into a Champions League, going in, beat them off 5 years later. So how long would you say your adjustment period was, Ryan, until you were actually settled and purely concentrating on football? How long did it take you to get settled in here?
I was also very lucky. They moved me into like a digs. So I stayed with Lady Carol Cooper, who's I don't think I've met a bigger Hearts fan in my life. She's not missed a game in 60 odd years. So she was very good to stay with, because straight away I knew the expectations of what to expect, and I had a sort of like a fan, living with the fans.
Yeah.
So I was getting a good sort of sense of what was expected and what was not, what was deemed as unacceptable from the word go. So she really helped me to settle in and sort of gave me that mother, second mother, and helped me out. But I'd say probably a good 6 months to just finally settle in and not worry about anything other than playing the football and training during the day.
Was there any sort of senior players at the time when you first arrived that kind of you feel like you could go and speak to for advice? Because I know things were a bit manic in terms of the first team squad
back
back
60
then.
first players. I had a lot to choose from.
Were they coming to you for advice?
No, at that time, Stephen Presley was the captain. He made an effort when I first arrived to introduce himself. Another guy, Robbie Nielsen, you might know, he was also very helpful. I used to clean his boots when I first arrived.
Right.
So, it was sort of the young boys at the time. If you're a defender, you sort of clean the defender's boots. But when I first arrived, I think I had 6-7 players I used to have to clean boots for.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of them just now. Goncalves, Presley, Nielsen, Karapetis, the other boy, he was a left midfielder, blonde hair, from Portugal.
Oh, this feels like a test now, right?
Tiago Costa. He played once against Inverness, that's right.
He had the weirdest portrait tattoo on his calf that looked like his mum. It was really odd.
It was for me. It was great because I got to see.
Well, that's quite a senior bunch there when you list them out. I mean, in that squad, they were actually kind of mid-20s to late 20s. Elvis, obviously the club captain. That's, if you're looking for people for advice, those were probably the main ones in the team that you would pinpoint at that stage.
Paul Hartley was still there. There was strong internationalists throughout the team. Takas Fisas, who was at the game on the weekend, he was there. Julian Brelia. There was a lot of good quality players for. As a young boy, get to watch them train and see how they went about their business was, like I said, from a boy from Adelaide, I was enjoying every minute of it.
Was there a disconnect, though, being in that under-19s squad when you felt that there was so many first-team players between you and a first-team jersey? Did that, did the route to the first team at that stage just seem impossible?
I think for me it wasn't too bad because my main thing was trying to get into the 19s team.
Right.
So the first team was a long way away from me. I think players a couple of years older than me, they would have been a little bit disheartened because, like you said, we're bringing in 8-9 players who, Stephen Farrell at the time was trying to work out which one was which, and 30 first team players training, then another 20 with the reserves, and the 19s had another. There was, like I said, 75 players trying to fit into 3 teams was very difficult. So in that way, the coaching staff probably had a harder time than the players, because for the players you had so many people you could go talk to.
Was there anyone you've seen during that spell that kind of fell by the wayside that you think if things had been a bit more structured first team wise would have made a bigger impression at Hearts? Is there anyone that you can remember off the top of your head that we might look back on and go, they got maybe 1 or 2 games but they never quite made the grade?
Again, it's difficult to say, because there's been so many players that do well at 19s level, do well at reserves, and then the first team's totally different. So it's hard to sort of to pick one player, but I think all of those players would have loved to have been at Hearts now. Put it that way, they would have got a chance, they would have got an opportunity, and for them it would have been a real, they would have been able to say, okay, right, I wasn't good enough for Hearts, or yes, I was good enough. But for them, I think a lot of them are maybe feeling I never got a chance, and it's that sort of thing that they'll now never know.
Ryan, one final question on your time in the under-19s, and it's actually Ross's point on Football Manager that's brought it to mind. There was a time when there was a real focus amongst the Hearts fans on the under-19s team because of a couple of high-profile additions in terms of youngsters. There was Branimir Kostadinov and Dimitri Kopil. Were you in the team when those guys came in? Did you have first-hand experience with them?
Yeah, I was, and there was another boy, Ratic? No.
Oh yeah.
Slovenian.
Yeah, he was on the Soccer AM.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there were 3. Again, if they were at Hearts now, they would probably play week in, week out, or they would be in and about it. But at that stage, there was just too many players. That they're probably 3 players who came in with the huge profile, and again, it was difficult for them because a few of the they came in and they were probably expecting, because of they seen themselves in the evening news, they seen themselves in the paper. They were probably wanting to be in the first team a lot quicker and couldn't work out why. They'd been brought over a bit of a high profile, but they were nowhere sort of near the team. And Branimir was a good striker, strong, fast, powerful. Dimitri Kopil was very, very good on the ball. Matej was a great defender. So it's very difficult to say whether they would have made a career at Hearts or they wouldn't have, but you can't say that they were bad players or not good enough for Hearts.
I think he's playing in Thailand or something now.
Possible. I think that's why it was so strange for us as supporters, in that we were getting used to, at that point, guys coming in from further afield, and that we had Egert Jonsson was coming in at the time, and guys like yourself and Rocky Visconti coming in from Australia, and we were kind of conditioned to that. But then these guys came in with this real fanfare of the next Georgie Hadji, and you're thinking, well, we've never had this before. We're used to a kind of cosmopolitan bunch, but to have these guys who are being held up as world beaters, you were thinking, we've got this real scouting network. And then, I don't think any of them even managed a first team appearance between them.
And partly beating Celtic to them as well.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, and it would have made sense to us, I think, if they had got maybe 10-15 games under the belt and just not quite made it. It was too physical for them or something like that, but just to never actually see them, it was such an anti-climax for the support that it was an odd scenario. But on to your first taste of first team action, which I believe was against Gretna in May 2008.
Yeah, not many people get that.
Aye, right at the end.
What stadium was it?
Fir Park.
Yeah. There you go.
I was there.
It
was a grim night.
I'm sure it's the lowest ever Hearts crowd.
I think it probably is.
Because Gary Glenn got sent off.
And that's when everyone had started to kind of realise that this Gretna experiment was failing quite miserably as well.
I think that's their last ever game.
Yeah.
And I think the Hearts fans...
They're now Gretna 2008.
I think the Hearts fans knew that there was going to be changes that summer as well, and things were sort of just petering out. Well, we're trying to obviously introduce a few of the youngsters.
On the subject of changes that summer, you made your first appearance in May 2008. What was your expectations or your hopes, more to the point, for the following season? Did you think that you had a real chance to force yourself into the first team at that point?
Yes and no. I was more concentrated on the reserves. I knew, I was sort of switched on. I knew it was the last game of the season. They were probably blooding some youngsters, but I wasn't coming back to pre-season thinking I'm going to be starting next to Christoph Barrett. I realised that there's still a long, long way to go, and looking back, they was just giving me that little bit of a taste to then go back pre-season, work hard, come back the following season and play well in the reserves. And I think if you can understand that, you accept it a lot better than, I was in the first team, I was on the bench, now I'm nowhere. I think a lot of young players can't quite grasp what is happening or the bigger picture. And I think that's where a lot of young players sort of fall by the wayside or get misled or sort of don't understand. But you know, I had Darren Murray at the time, who was a sort of great mentor for me, and he just said, you need to keep working hard in the reserves. You know, you're a good player, your chances are going to come. If it means you're going out on loan to get first team experience, or if it means, you know, travelling with I used to travel with the Hearts first team squad for 2 years and not even make an appearance on the bench. But they were like that. They were just getting me used to being around the first team boys, you know, eating dinner the night before, getting sort of in a relationship with them before they chuck you in at the deep end. And I think that works well if you understand what it is. At the same time, if you don't, it can be a bit of a hindrance.
As it was, you spent the better part of the next 2 years on loan, first at Ayr United and then at Partick Thistle. How did those clubs differ from Hearts at the time?
Hugely, but at the same time, because where I'd come from in Adelaide was very similar to that. So I went to Ayr United, and you got your own kit. They washed it for you, but you sort of was 15 pairs of shorts, 15 tops. If you were late, you were getting the triple XL, or you were getting the smaller size of t-shirt. There was no sort of Ryan Stevenson was there at the time, so he had all his stuff. Sort of, he was the boss at Ayr United, so he had all his stuff, and then there was the captain had all his stuff, and then the rest of us sort of had to fight for it all. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think I played 32 games at Ayr. Absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, we got relegated, but Brian Reid was there at the time. He was the manager, and got to play centre mid, right mid, left mid, right back in games where you need a win. It was as simple as that. You had to sort of really make an effort, and I loved that from reserve football, where you had players coming back from the first team who, quite honest, couldn't be bothered. You had young players who maybe weren't ready, and I just had to get into that first team environment, which I really enjoyed.
What were your thoughts on the standard of the lower leagues? Obviously, this season, due to the fact that we're in the Championship, I've been very impressed by how a lot of the sides, even the part-time sides, are trying to keep the ball on the deck and play football. What was it like going back sort of 3-4 years when you were at Ayr United? Was it a decent standard, did you find? Were you quite taken aback?
Yeah, I found it very difficult. My first game was against Dundee, who were throwing money around. They had Gary Harkins, Lee Griffiths scored that day. They had the left back who's now down at Derby, getting into this Forsyth. Forsyth. They had a good team, back then. I think they didn't even win the league. I'm sure Inverness won the league. They had Richie Ford, Dougie Emery. They had good players. There was good players kicking about, and then there was a lot of players that had, again, maybe gone into clubs and decided I'm going to drop down a level because it's closer to home or it's closer to this. And like I said, I couldn't speak highly enough of my time at Ayr and the standard of football that I was in.
In terms of the benefits of those loans, Ryan, were the benefits mainly game time, as you said, or were there other things that you learn at that level or at those specific clubs that you couldn't have learned at Hearts at the time? Yeah,
I think there's so many. I think it goes down to your mindset. If you go into it thinking, oh my God, I've got sent out on loan, I need to travel 2 hours to go play for Ayr, this is the worst thing in my life. Do you know what I mean? Or if you go down and say, I'm going to learn as much as I can, I'm going to speak to the older pros. Mark Roberts was there, who's now the manager at Ayr. He had a great career at Partick Thistle. Told me every week that he scored at Tynecastle. Kevin James, who played at Hearts, he was a centre-back. Good experience. I'm trying to think of Ryan Stevenson. He was our centre midfielder at the time. So these are not bad players I was playing with, and I was just trying to pick in their ears, listening to what they do. They've played the game for 10 years at a senior level, which is very difficult to do. So for me, it was great to just sort of listen and learn, and then on a Saturday have that chance for me to make mistakes, for me to create a goal, for me to play against a tricky winger, to play against a big tall striker, to play against a fast striker, to go into games where you just have to win. It doesn't matter if you play good football, bad football, you just need to win. Otherwise you get relegated or you lose. So I just loved that whole experience and just being thrown in there. Fans, it was the first sort of experience I had with fans. Again, it sounds silly and sounds stupid, but I was 19 and running out at Ayr United, and everyone's like, this is the worst stadium ever. I was like, there's 3,000 people that will come out to watch us on a Wednesday night. In Australia, that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? They're like, oh no, it's wet, it's raining. 3,000 people have paid 20 quid each, made an effort to come out and watch. The least you can do is go out and put on a performance and try your very best. All right, we might lose, we might win, but for me, I just loved every minute of it.
Was there any funny abuse you can remember back in those games? Because obviously you could hear just about everything that's being
Must have
said.
heard it all.
Remembering we're only allowed to say
Yeah,
certain ones on radio.
Yeah, I can tell you a few afterwards, but there was some quality shouts.
Yeah.
Once people sort of worked out that I was Australian, there was a few very, very good shouts that you're playing and you can't obviously show any facial expression, but you just wanted to go over and shake the guy's hand because you said an unbelievable shout you just come out with.
I was listening to Sports Sound earlier in the week, and John Rankin mentioned on there that a couple of weeks ago they were talking about the lack of atmosphere at some Scottish games, and John Rankin mentioned that a couple of weeks ago Ross County Dundee United on a Friday night, it was on BT Sport, and that the atmosphere was so lacking at that game that he could hear the commentators commentate on the game while they were playing. Was there ever any experiences like that, as particularly in the lower leagues, when the atmosphere was so lacking that you could literally hear background noise?
I've heard someone's phone go off.
There's an ambulance
What was the
Just
ringtone?
your normal ringtone. Yeah, that's probably the strangest thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so after that experience in the lower leagues then, you find yourself back at Tynecastle towards the end of the 2010-2011 season, and you got a wee run of appearances, at least at that point. Jim Jeffries was in charge by then. Going into the 2011-2012 season, you were obviously by this point kind of 2021. Were you starting to feel that season was maybe make or break for your Hearts career?
Yeah, a little bit. But then again, I was still. My dream since I've been 4 was to play first team. If that meant 26, I started playing in, or 17, it didn't matter. That was my dream. That's what I wanted to do. So I was not too worried if it still took me another couple of years. For me, again, I'll keep going back to it. I was from Adelaide. I was getting paid to play football overseas. I would, anyone in Adelaide, I'd be like, yeah, I've got the best job in the world, because all I had to do was wake up and go to training, which I would do even if I wasn't getting paid for. So to get paid for it, to go on with all your friends, all your mates, I was living away from mum and dad, which, when you're 18, 19, 20, is great. You're getting good money at that age. I was just loving every minute of it, and I was starting to feel, a few players around me had sort of started to break in, but then again, I was a defender. It was very difficult at that time, or even to throw you in as a sort of very young defender. And around that time was a lot of turmoil when I was maybe thinking I should have played. So sometimes I was almost a bit like, well, just work away in the background, and when it all sort of settles down, then you can make your break then.
I wish they could take that soundbite there and play that to every single kid in this country wanting to be a footballer, because it's crazy to think some of the people that think they've made it and they're like 17, 18 years old. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Just to hear kind of that coming from you, it's absolutely brilliant. And you're not even from Scotland. It's absolutely crazy to think that there's people going about like that.
I think I'm not picking on the Scottish boys or that, but I think sometimes they don't realise how lucky they actually are.
Exactly, yeah.
Boys from Australia, I've played with a lot of good players in Australia who are now primary school teachers, who are working away, joiners, builders, whatever, who would have absolutely bitten your hand off to be in an under-19 squad and have just gave everything for it. So, even some boys I know, they're like, you can go on loan here, or you can sign for, a team in Glasgow. They say, it's 2 hours in the morning, I need to drive.
There is one player in particular I'm thinking when you say that.
I'm not picking on anybody, on players, or they're part-time, or they're this and that. I'm just going to work with my mate and get money that way. When I know boys in Australia who would drop everything at a hat to just have that chance to go join a team in Glasgow, to travel 3 hours a day to be a professional footballer. I think sometimes people in Scotland just don't understand how easy they've got it.
It's interesting to hear your thoughts specifically on that, Ryan, because I do think the reason I asked the question about that summer, the kind of summer of 2011, is that I think at that point there was a frustration coming from the fans on your behalf, and that was sometimes projected potentially onto you in terms of frustration about not breaking through, because we were starting to, as you say, see some youngsters breaking through, and your name had been there or thereabouts for so long, and people who watched the reserves had seen glimpses of it, and we had heard some reports even when you were in a struggling Ayr team that you were getting on well there, and there were, I think, as supporters who love to see youngsters come through, to build our own players as we're seeing at the moment. It was frustrating to continually see, well, surely this is McGowan's chance. Well, surely now this is McGowan's chance. And it still never happened. And I think it's interesting to hear that never really set in for you, that you were still just completely focused on it and it'll happen sometime, whether it's now or not, or then. I think for ourselves as supporters, we were getting increasingly frustrated for you, thinking surely eventually we turn to Ryan, which obviously that did happen in the first game of the season, the 2011-2012 season at Ibrox, a 1-1 draw, which saw a man of the match performance from yourself. What are your memories of that day?
I remember I wasn't going to start until about, I think it must have been the Tuesday before the game. I want to say Darren Barr was going to play right back, but he was injured because Jamie Hamill was suspended for the first 2 games.
Right.
So I remember the right back spot was kind of up for grabs. And then I'm sure it was Darren Barr. Don't quote me on it, but I'm sure he was going to play. And then reshuffled, all of a sudden I was in at right back. And then, when you can tell Jeffries at the time wasn't 100% sure left or right. For 20 minutes of training I was in, and another 20 minutes I was out. I wasn't sure, and then Thursday he just pulled me aside and says, "You're going to start against Rangers first game of the season. I think you're going to do it, so just go out and do it." And that was all I needed to hear. I was playing against the Spanish.
It was some guy that just signed that season for the La Liga, and he was
Ortiz.
Yeah, and to be fair, you did have him in your back pocket for a nice part of the game. But he was quite a quick player, for what I can remember.
He's one of Rangers' cast of thousands that they have employed over the last wee while. So, the man of the match performance that day, but as you say, behind the scenes, there was still that thing of not quite sure, and Jamie Hamill had been brought in that summer. We all assumed the supporters, I think primarily as a right back. Were you still, after that man of the match performance, did you think, I'm going to get a run here, or were you still thinking it might be Darren Barr next week?
Yeah, I was thinking I'm going to play. I think I've done well enough to play the following week, but then Jamie Hamill was probably going to come in. But for me, that was alright because I just got my taste. That was my, the first game where I thought, yep, I can play at this level. I've done well. There's not too many places in Scotland which is more difficult at that time, which was Ibrox away. We played unbelievable, if I remember right, that day. Big David Moore was on fire.
Scored the header from the corner. We should have won that game, to be fair. Definitely
I gave the ball away halfway line, went down and they scored. So that was, I remember coming in afterwards and had the man of the match. I think it was champagne, and Jim Jeffries just went right through me.
Can imagine that.
He gave the ball away. He cost us 3 points, pretty much like that, which was good because I did give the ball away. I did cost the team 3 points.
Did he take your champagne off you?
No. I was going to take that off. I don't have a good fight for that. But, which was good. But then, so I started to think, I'm definitely there or thereabouts. Second choice, maybe for 3 of the back 4 positions. I'm pretty happy with that because people get suspended, people get injured. Yeah. And then we get the text message, come to Tynecastle. No social media, nothing. Just get yourself to Tynecastle, 6:15. Jeffries has been sacked.
Yes, that was going to be my next question. What impact did that have on the dressing room coming so early in the season, particularly when Jim and Billy Brown had just signed a number of individuals in that team? Was it did it particularly affect those players who had just come in, or was it a massive surprise to everyone in the dressing room?
I think it was a surprise for everyone, to be honest. I think the previous season we had done really well. For 6 months we gave a great challenge, and I think we went 13 games unbeaten. We were flying. We strengthened, which for the first time in I think 4 seasons we had done. We brought in proper signings, a good right back, what we needed. Whereas before it was just there's 6 players, sort of fit them in.
And people who were proven in the SPL at this time, Jeffrey seemed to have managed to persuade Romanov to go with the Scottish kind of tried and trusted
sort
players.
of get that sort of backbone. He was almost trying to replicate the 98 team with the players he was buying, the positions he was buying for, and he assembled a good squad which everyone was happy with. Loved pre-season was great. We just had a great away win. I'm sure we played Dundee United at home, which we drew. I think we drew.
Yeah,
memory serves correct.
Right,
yes.
Yeah. And then there was a European game away to PAX, wasn't there?
Yeah.
That was
yes. In Hungary. Yeah.
Jamie Hamill scored the penalty, and then he got sacked.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that was pretty much
Pretty
after
much,
that.
yeah.
Which was sort of like, well, that's a decent start to a new season.
Yeah, but you are right. I remember there was a long run towards the end of the previous season where we were kind of hanging on to third place, and the expectation had been set that we were going to do a bit more than that. We were going to try and challenge the old firm again, and that kind of fell away. And then I think the line peddled by the Lithuanians in charge of the club at that point was that they could see the decline continuing into the next season. But you're right, ultimately that depends whether you look at the summer as wiping the slate clean and starting again, or whether it does continue something like that.
If the fortune tellers could tell that, why did they not do it pre-season before spending all that money on those three players?
Well, that was the real kind of span in the works of it all, and it meant that we were really making it up as we went along, because the transfer window was almost over and we had to get someone in.
And it gives an excuse straight away to Paulo Sergio when he came in. He didn't have any of his players. So straight away, it for us as players, we couldn't really understand it, but then we don't get any say in anything.
Before we go on to Paulo, Ryan, one thing that stuck out that you said there was that you're drawing similarities to the 98 team. That's interesting for us because obviously you weren't here in 98 and you weren't necessarily a Jambo in 98. So how did you become aware of Hearts history? Was that through guys like Jim Jeffries and Gary Locke in the dressing room, or how do you know the 98 team, for example?
Carol Cooper, the lady I stayed with.
Right.
In my bedroom was the starting 11 program. So I knew everything, and that's all she speak about, or go back even way before, if we only had Robbo, if we only had Big John on the wing, if we only had players, and I'd just listen, pick her brains, and she'd say, at the time when we were really struggling and everyone was coming in, she would say, this wouldn't go on back in my day.
Yeah.
If we had, those players of the 86 and all this, DVDs, for me, I had a lot of spare time. But, when it's freezing cold and coming from Australia, that's just the worst thing in the world. So I would sit in and watch old games, derby games. Honestly, you go into a house, you'll probably have 150, 160 Hearts games, which for me as a football fan was just perfect on a Tuesday night. We just sounds like a bit of a loser, but I'll just sit in them and watch them instead of doing whatever.
Well, it's an interesting insight into why, and we're going to touch on it later in terms of your unique relationship with the supporters, but that is interesting because that sounds like the texts that we send each other before Derby Day since we've started doing this show, saying, I'm up, it's 2:30 in the morning and I'm sitting watching a derby from 3 years ago for inspiration, that kind of thing. So do you feel like that was a unique connection that you had then, because you spent time with Carol and you had those DVDs at your disposal and that kind of thing? Do you feel that was separated you from the other young players at the time?
Yeah, if you could put it that way, it was probably one of the best things that could happen for me. She was everything that I needed and wanted at the time. Her daughter's Claire Cowan, who is obviously the PR lady at Hearts. So, straight away I was getting all the inside information. I was getting they just die Hearts, which was, for me as a player, I just was learning on what fans like, what they don't like, what can sort of make a difference. And then, they should have all their mates and they would come around the house and they'd say, he was wearing white socks with his boots. So just little things like that. And then we had Darren Murray, who was at the under-19s as well, black boots only. That was his policy. So, my dad's very old-fashioned, he's very old school. Which is just, when you keep hearing it all the time, you're just like, right, don't wear white socks with your boots. Because it's just, someone can just look at it and then straight away, don't fancy it. He could be the best player in the world, but you would just look at him and something in your head straight away is just like, he doesn't fancy it. It's a Wednesday night, it's raining, he doesn't fancy it. And I think to start off as a player, the more positive and the more good things you can get goes a long way. Cool.
Let's move on to Paulo Sergio then. After the couple of European ties, the slightly easier European ties, he and yourselves in the squad were faced with a rather daunting task of 2 matches against Spurs. What was your reaction at the time? Now, obviously, you didn't play in the first leg.
I was dropped.
but you were involved in the second leg, which technically means that you're unbeaten against Spurs. So now, yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Undefeated in England against English opposition.
That is true, yes.
I was at that game as well, and down in London, that was something else. That.
Yeah. What was your impression from the bench watching your...
I wasn't even on the bench.
What was your impression?
Forget that about that season, the 2000 and...
You had that spell for about
No, you and Jamie Hamill were certainly swapping back and forth.
Even that season, I got very lucky. Well, it sounds horrible, but Jamie done his knee. So he was out for a long time, so I played right back. He became fit again. I was out of the team for 2 weeks. Danny Granger done his knee, so I went left back.
Right. And then again, Jamie was injured just before the Celtic semi-final.
Came back in.
Yes.
So that's a lot of that season. I was in and out, and I would go from playing to not on the bench to in the stands, which was was probably my hardest time because I was just, I was playing well, and then I couldn't understand how I could go from a starting 11 to not making the 18.
And difficult, I suppose, to really establish form if you're never guaranteed a place in the team. Yeah,
and then I was, chucked in at left back and expected to sort of get up and down like Danny Granger and put balls in, and I was, it was difficult at that time.
So on the Spurs game, sitting in the stands, as we've established, what was it like to watch your team being taken apart so comprehensively?
I think it just showed everybody what you have to be like to make it at the top level. These guys were stronger than us, faster than us, physically bigger than us, which in one sense is frustrating because that's nothing to do with football. You can individually, you can get faster, you can get stronger, you can get all those things. But then on top of that, their touches were perfect. They knew where each other was moving. They played at such a pace. They pressed like we've never been pressed before. They were making our players look like amateurs when the week before we were making other teams look like amateurs. And I think it just showed you they blew us out of the water pretty much the first 15 minutes. I think we were 3-0 down.
I think it was the physical side that struck me when I was in the stands watching it, and we had guys like Big John Sutton and Stevenson in the team that night, and they were decently, fairly sized guys, and then you looked at guys like Kabul and Tom Huddleston, you're like, my God, they look so small in comparison. And I just couldn't, I'd been down to a couple of English games, but when you see them play each other, it doesn't quite dawn on you until that night.
Well, the thing is as well, I think I'm right in saying that Bale played in that game. And, I mean, that's the size and the physicality, and then matched with that supreme speed.
And that's who you would have been up against, wouldn't it? It would have been Bale.
Would have been Bale.
So I can imagine you looking from the stands going, I would have dealt with him, no problem.
Half of me was a little bit delighted. Go on, Jamie, good luck for that one. I'll sit and watch it.
So what are your memories of playing in London then? As Ross says, I think as supporters we have real clear memories of that game because the atmosphere is something that I've rarely experienced. Did that transmit onto the park?
It's just after the riots as well.
It was.
It was like we were obviously roaming about
because the
Tottenham
ticket
area
office was set on fire. The ticket office hadn't recovered by the time we were there.
It was absolutely crazy.
And I remember Tottenham fans coming up to us after the game and actually congratulating us as supporters on how well we had done. The fact that they had never really encountered an atmosphere like that at White Hart Lane. Does it make it onto the pitch when it's as big as that in the stands?
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing was if we got beat 6-0, everyone would be like, they've changed the whole starting 11. I mean, we were almost the reserve 11. We think, well, surely we can't do worse than 5-0. That's what we were going into it, and then it was 0-0 after 20 minutes. We're like, we're already 3 better than the previous team before. I'm playing better than they did, and then we got a chance. Gordon Smith, who if you speak to now, still tells him he hits the bar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
He peels for a goal, and the ball doesn't bounce outside the 18-yard box. So how is he peeling for a goal?
I think we were still. I was celebrating that goal last week. I still think it's going in every time I see it on the TV.
But I think and then so we get little moments like that, and you think, and then you can, if you reverse it, you can know what Tottenham like. We've just beat this team 5-0. I need to play in this game. They made changes, and they couldn't really be bothered with.
It's funny looking back on that game and seeing Harry Kane where he is now. I've missed that penalty that bit.
Well, they played him with the idea of getting him a couple of first team goals under his belt and settling him in, as you say. But that plan kind of went awry because we really stepped up to the occasion and matched them that night.
Townsend and Rose, I'm sure it was. Me and Temps on the right. So now you look at those two players. We weren't playing against the bad side either.
No, definitely not.
Modric was unbelievable as well. So for us as young players, and I think it helped that we were all sort of young players chucked in as well. I think we had Webby, Zaliukas and Granger, and then me, so we sort of had it strong.
Scatcher was in the middle as well. He was playing for the middle.
Robinson and Erget, Temps on the right, Novi on the left, and Smith off. So we'd all played in the reserves, we played each other. And,
there was a kind of unity there.
Seeing each other, we were at White Hart Lane, it's 0-0 after 30 minutes. You're doing well, Gogsy, Temps,
Oh, God. Imagine that feeling.
It's a big step up. It's that thing as well of looking around, I suppose, and seeing where you've managed to get to make it to White Hart Lane from playing in the reserves.
Sterling Albion, when we used to play reserves, against Motherwell, and obviously no disrespect to them, but in front of 10 people and 4 dogs to down at White Hart Lane with
ringtones left, right, and centre.
Down at White Hart Lane with 3,000 Hearts fans just going, if we kept 4 passes, it was like a goal. Everyone had a good drink and everyone was just going crazy.
Okay, but we're going to get onto the cup at length. We need to watch our time here because I don't want to keep you here right through till tomorrow morning. But I know you maybe still got a wee bit jet lag and stuff, but that's probably pushing it. But avoiding the cup for a moment, which we're about to go on it in great detail. We've spoken a wee bit about the lack of consistency on your part that season because you were in and out, but the whole club and certainly the team in the league really lacked consistency that season. Was that massively down to the fact that the off the field problems started to play a part on the field as well, with the lack of wages ultimately? Is that what really contributed to the fact that we in the league failed to achieve what we would expect that season?
Yeah, I think so. I think and again, sort of taken to a fan's point, I think some fans get caught up in the Premier League and all the hype in the Premier League. He's on 40 grand a week, 60 grand a week. Players at Hearts are on probably the same wage as a good plumber, as a good, as probably most of the fans. If you're on a good wage, you're probably on the same wage as us. But they've got families like what we do. You ask a good plumber to go no wages for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, when someone's telling you, okay, this Friday you'll get it. So you're like, oh, that's all right. I don't mind that. And then Friday afternoon comes, you get a text, the wages aren't going to be in it, so it might be next week. I'm thinking, all right, that's fine. Our biggest concern as a playing group was that there was no communication at all. We didn't have, we used to go into meetings and say, listen, just tell us, if you're struggling for money, just tell us, listen, you're not going to get paid for the next 3 weeks. But then at the end of the 3 weeks, pay us. Don't tell us you're going to pay us on the Friday. And then, there's been no funds, we can't, but, it'll be next Friday. You're thinking, oh, okay, quiet weekend this weekend. But you make adjustments because you understand the next time. But we were continually let down. We were continually told one thing and another thing happened. We didn't see, anyone who we thought should be there. We were getting poor Claire Cowan, guys from the office who, when we were asking questions, we're kind of like, we don't have the answers. We need to hear it from people higher up. Well, for us, where's the people higher up? Oh, they're in a meeting, they're in Lithuania. Like, well, I can bet you they're getting their wages on a Friday. They're not then having to go out and play in front of everyone, which, again, like I said before, it's not about the money, but when you've got mortgages and things like that to pay for, families coming up to it in and around Christmas, do you know what I mean? Some boys were just like, just be honest with us and tell us, and it does make a bit of an influence off the field for sure.
I remember at the time I actually went on a bit of an unlikely winning spree, and the hashtag playing for free and still winning cropped up. At what point did
that was brilliant. At
what point did the gallows humour kick in? And the fact is, look, it's really bad, but we're going to have to get through it, and the way to get through it is by there being a team spirit in there. How did that get going? Was there anyone that particularly sparked that, or was it just in you all that you realised you have to get through it however you can?
I think the other thing was we had gone a long time like that before it actually get out in the papers. Heart's biggest thing was this can't get out, and we were like, well, pay us on Friday and it won't come out. But then it went like 6-7 weeks, and then they would give us 60% of our 7 weeks wages, and you're like, all right, it's better than nothing, But their big thing was don't tell papers. And then the papers found out, and then you guys or everyone else sort of like, they thought that was the first time we hadn't been paid when it had been going on for 2-3 months previous.
There's guys that have waived their wages, like Andy Driver. I know he kind of said, "I'll waive that I was due," which is incredible to think of. And as you're saying, if depending on how much you were getting paid per week, would mean how much you're going to miss out on over a period of time, over months, and then you've got like 25 grand or whatever sitting there waiting to be paid to you, and then to go, nah, it's fine. I know how bad the club's doing. There's not many people that can do that,
Or even bonuses. We came in for bonuses and says, all right, we understand it's difficult situations. End of the season, just pay it all in a lump sum. End of the season, and the club was like, yeah, okay, we agree to that, but maybe we'll make it 50% of your bonus, like flat out, and we'll still pay you at the end of the season. Like, at least, do you know what I mean? We're bending our backs. At least give us a little bit.
Yeah.
Some boys, we made up a list. So we sort of prioritised the wages. So at the time I was single, just had nothing. So I said, technically, I don't have a family. It's not coming up to Christmas. I don't have that many outgoings. I'll be one of the last ones to be paid. So as the money came in, the ones with the families, the one with the houses, the ones that needed the money more than maybe someone else, they got paid. And that's how the players, we worked out a system that... which was quite funny. So the first players, you'd be like, oh, so-and-so got paid. So that the money's slowly coming in for the team. And, eventually you will get paid. But, again, it's very difficult.
Was it hard when, obviously, Ryan Stevenson was became sort of the poster boy for sort of what was going on between the players and the hierarchy, and then he obviously left. Was it hard not to say anything to fans when things were being raised on Twitter and other social media? Because Ryan did get quite a hard time for it, because, like you say, some fans up here do not see the gap between the SPL and the English Premiership, in terms of how much money these guys are making. Was it hard not to get involved, because obviously the club wouldn't be wanting you to,
Very difficult. You get a relationship. I know Ryan Stevenson's family. I know his wife well. I know all the boys. It's like the old cliche. It's a big family. But he was at that time. He needed the money, and I don't think I couldn't take that from anyone. If you go 10 weeks without a wage, and you've got a house, a car, a family. He was having to travel through from air on 10 weeks without anything, and then when you ask someone, when's the wage? Oh, I don't know, this guy from Lithuania is going to have to tell you. Well, why is he not here? Do you know what I mean? It's not as if it's just happened 1 week, 2 weeks. This has been over a 10-week period. And at that time he was one of our better players, and I think I don't think anyone, or from the playing side, was just like, right, go for it. If you can get a good move, 100%, see you later.
I think sometimes the fans have a trouble disconnecting between the board and what players might think about the club and the supporters in general. And I wanted to bring this up. Obviously, I spoke to you a little bit about it on the phone yesterday, about obviously what happened to Dylan last year. I think you obviously had one or two chats with fans on Twitter when everything was kicking off last year. Do you feel that sometimes the fans find it hard to understand that when you've maybe got a gripe, it's not so much with the club, the supporters, with the tea lady, anyone else, it's just with how maybe the board have approached a certain subject?
Yeah, I think for a Hearts fan, Hearts is the be all and end all. For players, it's a job. At the end of the day, it's our job. So we see it as a business, like any other business. So businesses some run well, some right now Hearts are fine. They're doing everything right. As a business model, previous years was disgraceful, really. Like that, for no one to come in and say to us about our wages or anything for 10 weeks. Any other job, I think, you would be able to sort of get out. Yet they were expecting us to train every day, to go out and 100%. Fans were asking us, journalists were asking us, and we couldn't say anything. We didn't have any say at all. Dylan's situation is different. His contract was out. It happens to millions of players all over the world. But I think some fans got a little bit caught up in it. Obviously Dylan's family, so I have a connection with that. Then Ryan Stevenson, I'd seen him make a lot of sacrifices. Jamie Hamill, Jamie McDonald. Okay, all of them got released. But I know them for 7-8 years. So you can't say if one of your friends got released or knowing behind the scenes of, Jamie McDonald just had a young kid, bonuses, wages. He's like, all right, I won't get paid 10, 12 weeks. I love playing for Hearts. It's a great job. For them to then turn around when he thinks he's got another year contract and do it, at the time I was more heartbroken for them. You're looking back at it, what else was Hearts going to do? Do you mean they didn't want to sign him? That's all they could do. But that's all I was saying was I just felt bad for those players because I have a relationship with those players. I wasn't saying, sack the board, Hearts are the worst team in the world.
Yeah. Some Hearts fans saying that on kickback.
What's he doing? I'm sure I got tweets, you need to forget about your brother, he's been terrible all year. And I'm like, well, all right, yeah.
Yeah, because you're not looking at it from that point of view.
Yeah, he could be the best player, he could be the worst player, but technically now my brother is unemployed. He doesn't have an income. He had, didn't know where he was going to live, and didn't know a contract. Same as Ryan Stevenson, Jamie Hamill. So if 4 of your friends all of a sudden, all at once, get unemployed and think they've got incomes, it's a difficult time.
The context did make it a kind of more emotive subject than it normally would be. So normally a contract comes to its end and that's just football. But in that scenario, because people had made sacrifices and stuff, it seemed like there was more on the line than just your next contract. It seemed like, or some people got drawn in at least, I think, supporters more than anyone else who hadn't seen the sacrifices that you had seen, but they came from this point of it's a real slap in the face, and that's not necessarily how it was. And maybe looking back now, it was just a business decision made by business people.
That's what football is at the end of the day. It's business decisions. Hearts can play on it perfectly. They play on the fans. They play. It was the right move. It was the right thing. I'm sure I'm going to get a question coming up, which I can go into more detail about Thames, and Hearts played that for their fans perfectly.
Yeah, that is something we're going to come to, but we're going to park it for now because I'd like to get back on to positive things. I'm going to ask one more question on the kind of negative side of the few years, then I'm going to throw a quick advert and we're going to work out exactly how much longer you can stay, and then we're going to go through the next 3 what questions we've got left. The final question on the negative side, and I know a couple of people have brought it up on Kickback, when you left the club to go to China, and we'll touch on that a wee bit more in future as well if we can, were you asked to sign anything in terms of non-disclosure so that you weren't able to talk about what had gone on at the club before you left?
No, not me personally. I didn't sign.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
So you're completely free to talk about...
Very crazy.
You could write a book about Romanov then and make a bit extra cash.
Yeah, but then I have no bad feeling. I could not speak highly enough of Hearts. They gave me, like I said before, they gave me an opportunity, they gave me a platform, they've given me pretty much everything I've gone on to earn, career moments, everything. So if you're looking for someone to badmouth Hearts, it definitely won't be me.
Well, that's good to know. Right now we're going to go a quick break. We're going to have a wee chat in the room, and then we will come back with as many more questions as we can possibly get to Ryan. Stay tuned to Monday Night Football. And we are back on Monday Night Football, and Ryan has stayed with us and made the schoolboy error of telling us that he's got as long as we need.
We've locked the door, so he's not going anywhere.
Ross is in control. He's the bouncer in this scenario. Right, so we're going to go on to happier memories, Ryan, particularly the cup run. Again, there may be some less happy memories even during this run, because there are a few games where you kind of drop in and out of the team a wee bit. So we'll focus the questions on the games that you played for obvious reasons. Now, the first one of those games, you were actually a substitute but came on with about 15 minutes to go at McDermott Park against St Johnstone. That was obviously...
I started the first game, I'm sure.
You started the first game, but then this is the replay at McDermott Park. Yeah, so you missed the Auchinleck Talbot game. You were rested for that one. Or were you suspended? There we go. But that was probably a good thing. Fraser Mullen came in for that one, and that was a bit of a ropey affair, that one. Mullen missed the penalty and it became a bit of a... we don't remember that one so much of the cup run. So, but one of the really memorable ones was at McDermott Park. You came on and then it all kicked off. We went 1-0 down, and then
hating life.
And then we got back into it as late as a late goal can possibly come. And even that early in the cup run, that game, I think, started to get this idea that there may be something special on the cards here. That night, we really just, despite being in quite indifferent form in the league, that night we just refused to lose that game. No matter how long it went, no matter what it took, we refused to lose. Can you remember there being something special about that night in terms of the resilience in the team?
I just remember Webster and Zaliukas being absolute monsters. Just being like, when you speak in 20 years' time, you just say, even now I would say that performance from those two for extra time was just unbelievable. I'm sure Webster must have headed 100 balls clear, when they were just lobbing it in.
Yeah.
And I think at that time, St. Johnson just had a thing over us. I don't know why, we just never seemed to win at McDermott Park, and we go 1-0 down, 10 minutes to go. And then, we started making a few chances. Suso looked like he was going to get something. Then to get it so late, the penalty, I remember extra time, we just had this real, we're going to get something here. Those things don't happen without, like you said, just a little belief, a little something. And then we started the extra time quite well, and we just looked the better team. We just looked like we're going to score. And then I'm sure the goal is like the biggest ricochet goal mouth scramble.
It's one of the scrappiest goals.
I'm sure it hits someone shoots it, hits my back,
yeah,
and hits the bar, then comes back and and then finally goes in.
Zal eventually scores it while looking like he's doing his hardest to put it over the bar as high as possible.
I'm sure it comes off his shin or something. And I remember just thinking, we're through. We're not going to lose because of how we were playing. And delighted it didn't go to penalties. That was my big thing. I didn't want to have to take a penalty. So I was just delighted it went to a penalty, and then they pretty much just bombarded us for the rest of extra time.
That season in particular, we had kind of had a thing with penalties already where...
That was even when we got the penalty, I think we'd already missed a couple before.
Yeah, and then...
missed one at Parkhead before he left, and I think Jamie missed one or two as well.
And then obviously that was when Jamie scored the penalty and then went... went Raj in Edinburgh terms. And there was a wee bit of a kind of thing between him and the Hearts support at that time, and it was a bit of a kind of fractious relationship. And a dodgy relationship between the team and penalties at that stage. On to another Zaliukas goal then, this one not quite so welcome, against St Mirren at Tynecastle in the next round, when we looked fairly comfortable, and then Zal managed to sneak one under the keeper to equalise for them from a Nigel Hasselbank kind of speculative pass across the goal mouth, really. Did you feel at that point, did the team feel like the chance had gone?
I think that was Craig Beattie's first game.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It certainly came in round about that time.
He came on a sub at Ibrox.
Yeah, and then
that was his first start.
Yeah. And he scored, I think, from a corner.
Yeah, he should have had two, because one got disallowed for...
for offside right on half-time, you're correct.
But I even remember thinking, or playing, as we've got a good striker.
Yeah.
We've got a guy who's a striker and he scores. That, for us was like, what's going on here? Both scored a goal.
Both bits.
And he was holding the ball up, and he looks, I tell him all the time, he looks so unconventional. Well, I can't really say much because I was like, but he doesn't look like he should be a striker, and he does things you're like, how did he just do that? But he was just...
Some shot on him as well.
Yeah. But then he doesn't look like... He doesn't hit it like Scatula or a Suso or something. Yeah. He sort of hits it straight, but it works for him, and he did really well. That I remember after that game, a few boys in with Blackie and Hamill, and that were like, we've got someone who we can really pinpoint if we need.
It gave us a real focal point of the team that we had lacked.
Stephen Elliott gone in and around him, Temps and Suso, and it just really gave us something different which we didn't have.
Well, the previous season we had that in Kevin Kyle, and Stephen Elliott worked really well buzzing in and around him and kind of picking up the scraps and stuff, and then we really lost that with Kyle with his injury, and it went, and we saw that when Beattie came back in, different type of player, big and physical but a wee bit more mobile than Kevin had been, and close control a wee bit better and stuff. But I think we all kind of felt it when Craig Beattie came in, and it ended up being a bit of a shame that injuries caught up at him just at the wrong time for Hearts. He could have gone in and really kind of done something for us, I think. So that was the St Mirren game at home. We then went to St Mirren Park, and actually that was one of our more dominant displays, I think, in that season, but it came after a rather controversial moment. I don't know if you remember it, where
Zaliukas punched it.
Well, they scored, and the referee had already given the penalty a second before. Was that another moment where it felt like we've got away with one here? There's maybe something in this for us.
Especially when Jamie then saves it.
Yeah.
And we're just thinking, again, we could have went a goal down St Mirren Park. they're difficult places to go. You know, we had a great backing there, but it was still a sort of difficult game. And then Hamill hits a screamer, I'm sure.
Yeah. While he was injured as well. Limps straight to the dugout.
And we were just thinking, this is up. And then Scatchell scores at the end. 2-0. Yeah. And then that all of a sudden you're in the semi-final. I remember before at St Mirren Park we were just saying, just need to go out and win this game, and we're in a semi-final at Hampden. We'll sell out our end. You know, at the time we're the last team in there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So Hibs and Celtic were already in, and Aberdeen. So you're thinking you're going to get a good game in a semi-final. Just need to get rid of.
Was there anyone in particular you fancied getting in the semis at that stage? Were you hopefully missing Celtic? And,
I think we're probably ideally you would have taken Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Just because then it wouldn't have caused such a big stir if you got Hibs or Celtic. You know, they would have been favourites. So I think we're probably, a personal point of view, I'd have probably taken Aberdeen out of three.
On to the semi-final then. Jamie Hamill, as we said earlier, I think did his Achilles in the lead up to that game and what was ruled out for the rest of the season. We lined up for that game with yourself at right back and Scott Robinson in front of you at right midfield. Do you know, how did that differ from the original plan had Jamie been fit? Were you confident that you would have started nonetheless?
Yeah, because I think in St Mirren, Jamie Hamill started sort of a right of a midfield three.
Yeah, he did. There's a more defensive kind of element of that midfield.
Yeah, I was sort of the right back, so my role was more, they didn't play anyone in front of me. That was their thing. So I was to get up and down, and then if it was Hamill, he sort of snuck in a little bit to try and flood the midfield, or when Scott Robinson for the semi-final was to sort of try and flood the midfield when we had the ball. When he didn't, he had a job to try and get out and help me out defensively.
Now, the interesting thing there, tactically, in terms of how that worked out in the semi-final, is that because it was Scott Robinson and not Jamie Hamill, it meant that there was kind of an obvious substitution to make at half-time when Craig Beattie came on, and as you said earlier, his influence just changed that game completely. We went from a team who kind of were in the game but didn't really look like scoring to a team who scored after like a minute of that half. What was the atmosphere like at half time in that game?
Pretty much went to plan. The plan was always to bring Beattie on, but he was in a bath like the whole week before, just in a hot bath. That's all we used to tease. Anytime you come into training, Craig Beattie was in a bath, shouting from the change rooms like, "Enjoy training, lads!" He's sitting in a hot bath and it's pouring with rain. But
probably tweeting from the bath.
The whole thing was just to get him to play what they thought the maximum time, which I think was 45 minutes, was max. And even then, I think they thought he might not last this 45 minutes. But the thing was just to try and keep it as long as we could 0-0. I'm sure that Key, he missed a couple of sitters.
Hit the post twice, I think, with two headers.
It's not as easy as it looks. He hits the sitter from a couple of yards out. He hits the post. But then we could have scored in the first 10 seconds.
Stephen Elliott put in from the slack back pass, I think, from Kelvin Wilson. Just before we go on to the aftermath or the end of that game in detail, Hibs had won their semi-final the day prior against Aberdeen, and I remember there being a real hysteria amongst the fans already at the potential that this thing could happen, this Edinburgh Derby final that we've never encountered before. Was that even mentioned amongst the players, or was the concentration too much on Celtic, or did it sneak in?
No, it was win this and you're going to play in one of the biggest games ever.
Do you think that helped, that the focus was less on Celtic and more about on the carrot at the end of that?
It just gave us a real something to hold on to, and I think that makes a difference when they score so late on. You know, we could have maybe went, Jesus, they've scored again late on. They're probably going to batter us for the next 5 minutes. The extra time's going to be, straight away you'll probably think penalties. But we're thinking, we got Hibs in the cup final. This is too good of an opportunity to try and let slip. And I think we've attacked straight from kick-off. I'm sure I remember Gary Locke like, get up, don't sit back. And then we get the penalty in the last couple of minutes, which, again, I can't remember the last time Hearts get a 90th minute penalty. Celtic.
Was it shock amongst the players at that point, do you think, that the penalty was given?
Yeah, that he gave it. I think it was shock. Because I don't think, if it was the other way around,
you'd be raging
like,
it. Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe he was just given
It's
that.
the fact that it's two hands, though, I think, that kind of sways it. Like, well, you can play on for one, but when it hits the second,
I'm sure we appealed for it like crazy, because we were just thinking, please give it. And then you can't really go on from there. And the funny thing was, we had practiced penalties a couple of days before, and Beattie was pretty bad. He was like trying to put it, top left, top right, and then he was just like, nah, I'm just going to put it down the middle, dink it down the middle, like not dink it, but just sort of clip it down the middle.
Yeah.
And he did 10 in a row. He got one of the young keepers that didn't know what was going on. He did 10 in a row. And I remember him saying to him, I'm going to score at Hampden, because he scored at Scotland against Georgia
in
the last minute. So as soon as the penalty went, I seen Beats get the ball. I was just like, yes, he's going to dink it down the middle. And all I was watching was Force at the time, because I'm like, if he dives, we've scored. And it was unbelievable.
Well, I've never seen so much joy in Ryan's face in that goal. I always remember you were the guy that followed Beats all the way right.
The other thing was, Big Carlos had told us before the game.
Bar was a booking away.
There was so many players on a yellow before that game. I think 5 or 6 before that game.
See it, it's so funny because obviously.
I think you tried to grab it at one point.
Beats goes running off. Then you see Darren Barr, someone else, and they all just hit the line.
Panic. that imaginary wall there.
I'm not on the yellow, I'm going for it.
What the funny thing is, I think someone said after the game that they didn't realise that only one player can be booked for a celebration. So I think someone said that if Darren had known that, he would have been right there with us. But it was that thing of like, they all thought that they would get back on the pitch and every single player yellow carded for the celebration.
Yeah, it was one of those moments that unless you were there, it's just
you're literally jumping for joy. That's what I'll always remember.
Well, the thing is, it was two-pronged as well, because there was that real thing of this is payback for all of those games where we've been robbed in the last minute against both of the Old Firm, but Celtic in particular at times, and it felt like all of those moments came home in one to give us just the greatest moment that you encounter in football, really. And then there was the other thing of the Hibs aspect of it, and I remember a guy in front of me just turned round, staring at me for the last 2 minutes after the penalty went in, just mumbling to himself like he was in a catatonic state, like he had gone mad, just saying, it's a Hearts Hibs final. It's a Hearts Hibs final. And I had to grab him and say, it's no yet. Wait 2 minutes and then we can cry together. But it was that real thing of like, not only have we got what we never thought we would get, which is this last minute in such a big game and a dodgy penalty and all those kind of things, it felt like we had finally got payback. But also that it set up this game that none of us had ever really even imagined before, I don't think, that this cup final to end all cup finals. Before we go on to that final then, you as a team had played Hibs 3 times that season and won all 3 games, including the New Year's game where you got your first Derby Day diving header. What was it like to score in front of the Hearts fans at Easter Road?
Oh, that was, again, these are the moments that you make all those sacrifices that are made, all those cold mornings, those training sessions that sometimes you could see far enough there, not going to, when I was back in Australia, not going to 15, the hottest girl in school's 15th party because you had a game the next day. All those sacrifices just come true in a split second. And I'd been at Easter Road too many times with Temps and with the rest of the boys for previous goals. So to score my first Hearts goal against Hibs at that end, it wouldn't have been the same if I scored the other end. But just it was so many things rolled into one that just makes it so much special.
Did Andy Webster give you any stick that you stole his goal, or was it cancelled out by the fact he scored the goal later anyway?
He scores late, but
because it was definitely going in. I mean, you snatched it.
Yeah.
How did I know that one was coming?
You wanted your name on the back of the t-shirt.
Even more than your celebration of the first goal, I remember you celebrating the second goal in front of the Hibs fans because it was from your long throw that the ball dropped to Webster further, and I just remember you turning around to them because they'd obviously been giving you a bit of stick. Because I think you took that little altercation with Sproul just prior to that.
I was playing left back.
And I just remember you basically just turning around and just going, well, there you go.
But more to that was I was knackered, and there was Webster went the other way. And after the first goal, I was knackered. After celebrating like my goal, I was pretty knackered. I think you can see it, and I sort of give someone a thumbs up, and I'm like, just breathing like I shouldn't have celebrated that hard. And then when the second goal scored, I'm like, I'm never running, chasing them away over there.
How raging were you at Zal when he cancels out your opener within a minute?
I couldn't even enjoy it for 2 seconds.
You were barely even back in position.
It was. He scored some amount of own goals.
I mean, that's a proper squaff, that one as well. I mean, that's right off the wrong side of his shit.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. But then it makes the other moments better. You know, the when Webster scores and the capture right at the end.
Scott mentioned that they are. Do you think you were lucky with the Sproul incident? The Hibbies would just abandon us if we never asked that at all. So
I think I probably was.
It was one of the weirdest headbutts I've ever seen. I mean, it had a bit of Zidane about it, but it wasn't even that coordinated. What was going through your head?
At the time, I remember, like, obviously I'd just been fouled, so I was getting up, and I could just see, like, his feet coming towards me. So instead of, in my head, I was thinking if I shoot up, I could catch him in the chin. So I just kind of pause. Lean forward and lean forward and just to let him, so he couldn't come near me. You have to sort of say, hey, respect. But then I think what helps is he falls down and makes it sort of. And as soon as
I remember that at the time, he makes a meal of it to the point where you're like, it wasn't that. It wasn't what you're trying to make it out to be.
Straight away, I go on to the whole, what's he doing? I've hardly even touched him. Whereas if he just sort of stood up and was,
went straight to the referee or that.
What did he just do? He's just headbutted me in the chest. Yeah, I probably would have been in a lot of trouble. But I think he helps me out, that he goes down theatrically.
Is that just?
But then I've met him before. He's a good guy.
Because that's what I was going to go on before we go into the big derby that you're kind of identified with. Has there been any other moments in derbies, people that you've particularly clashed with, or guys who you think back to and you think there was a real kind of tension between you on the park or anything like that?
No, I don't think so. I think Edinburgh's such a small place, you sort of bump into them all the time. And at the end of the day, they're just doing what you do. It's just
I think the fans like to think that there's more going on.
Fans would love it. Fans would love it if we, as a right back, if I hated the winger, the left winger, or
I think there's been a few characters, particularly at Hibs as well, over the years, who we've seen as being particularly.
Comical.
Well, that we've looked upon as certainly amongst the Hearts fans, they have really got backs up to an extent, and you've thought, well, that must transmit a wee bit onto the park. When guys like Derek Riordan, when he put that tackle in on Scatchell, the career ender kind of tackle, that you think at that point, that must transmit a wee bit onto the park.
Well, as a player, if you smash Derek Riordan, it's going to be good for you because the fans are going to love you, and it's going to be spoken about a lot. But recently, probably Lee Griffiths, he's probably one that gets a stick. I've met him a lot of times, and I would struggle to find a sort of nicer, calmer guy to speak to. And he's, I couldn't speak highly enough. I played against him, like I said, at my air days, so I've really seen him, how much he's worked hard and deserved to get where he's got. And at the end of the day, he loves Hibs, and he's done very, very well for him. And I think he takes the abuse pretty well, considering the amount he gets.
I think compared to some of the other players, I would never bracket him in the same bracket as Reardon or O'Connor. I think Griffiths has had these moments, but he does tend to sort of take the stick.
Yeah. He tends to harness
better than most.
He tends to harness it in the right way as well, and that, unfortunately for us, it does sometimes lead to performances.
But then I don't understand that. A fan or football, I think football's gone totally the wrong way. Fans can abuse players for 90 minutes. They score a goal, and Ryan Stevenson at Easter Road shushes, and fans are going crazy. I'm like, he's inciting a riot. Well, you've just called him every name under the sun, called his wife this and that, and he's shushed you, and you're complaining to police. He then gets a yellow card. I think it's just going to be. Half the people, normal people, social people, understand. Let him have his moment. Lee Griffiths scores. I think Lee Griffiths scores at Tynecastle, and if he stays on the pitch, he could do whatever he wants. I would love nothing more than him to run up and just stand in front of someone, point his shoulders, but you can't even do that anymore.
Well, that's the big hypocrisy of it as well. is that we're all crying out for big characters. We all want players with loads of personality who we can engage with, and even if it is a love to hate type thing, we want guys that we can go along to watch and know that we're going to be entertained. And that's why, as fans, we've identified with guys like yourself and guys like Rudy, because there is a banter there, and you know that we feel like you're sort of our representatives on the park, that you'll react the way we would react, and you'll have a laugh when something funny happens, and you'll go mad when something that we don't like happens. Whereas there are so many players who, and that's where the thing of he doesn't care comes from, is because they react in such a passive way. But that's maybe actually because if they don't, they're going to get punished for it, or the fans they're going to incite a riot and things like that. We actually want guys who get animated and have got a distinct personality.
Yeah. But as players, it's that fine balance of now you can't do anything, which just ruins it. There's nothing more than, if you want to score, you want to enjoy it, not thinking, oh my God, have I taken a step off the pitch? Have I just shushed 10,000 people who've just called me every name under the sun?
And that moment, more than any other, I suppose.
Yeah, I think...
You're not in any control.
Refs, I'm sure the refs don't enjoy doing it, but it's the people that have never played football in their lives
Some
coming up with rules because one time one person, cause I think if people just used a bit of common sense, it's a derby, obviously passions are going to be high. At least let the player celebrate and do what he wants.
Well, we've seen your celebration in China, so that was...
Yeah, China, you can do whatever you want.
You were away, you were at the stadium.
That's why you're at home there.
You can just do whatever you want when you score.
I bet you tweeted BT after that and said, check out this.
Okay, speaking of passions running high then, no more so than on the 19th of May 2012. Talk us through that experience from a player's perspective.
Yeah, it was difficult because obviously as soon as the semi-final, that's what everyone spoke about.
Yeah.
And Paulo Sergio was so big on, we played Dundee United this week, and everyone was just like, we don't care, we're playing Dundee United. We just want to be fit for the 19th of May. We don't, honestly, as players, it sounds terrible, but we couldn't care about any other game. But you had to come out in the media and say, big game this week against St Johnstone, we want to go out and put on a performance. And you were just like, no, we don't. We just want to beat Hibs in the final. That's all you wanted to do. From as soon as that semi-final whistle went, that's all you wanted to do. And there was not a day that went past between that semi-final and final that the boys didn't speak about it in the change rooms.
Was there an extra pressure on you guys in the lead up to that fight? I know, for example, Pat Fenlon took Hibs away to Dublin to get them out of the spotlight and to allow them to, just gradually kind of build up to it. Whereas Hearts stayed, they were in the spotlight throughout, living up to the media obligations that they had and stuff. So that in itself meant that you were in the cauldron, you were under the spotlight the whole time. Was there an added pressure as well because Hearts were unbeaten in derbies for 9 games, I think, at the time? So there was that real thing of, if you lose, not only have you lost the cup final, but you're really strong favourites there as well to win that game.
Yeah, it depends on your mentality, on how you want to look at it. You can look at it and be, we might lose this and we'll be remembered forever as a team that did it. But then surely you look at it the other way. Well, that's what I did. I just thought this is your chance to, people to remember you for the rest of your life. So why would you want to think about the opposite? I think that just sort of filtered through the whole team. We just thought, what an opportunity this is for us, who's had a mediocre season, who we don't really have any superstars in the team. It would be one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game of our career for a lot of players. Why not just go out and enjoy it and win that game? That's all we thought about, was winning that game.
How did Paulo Sergio influence that approach? Because I think as fans, we've actually gone back to it a lot over the last few derbies. He gave one particular interview where he said about, I think Pat Fenlon had said, all the pressure's on Hearts, on the basis of the fact that we had been unbeaten for a long period of time in the derby and stuff. And Paulo Sergio said, if you'd rather have no pressure on you, then that's fine, keep losing. We'll win and we'll deal with the pressure. And I think the fans loved that. It was one of their favourite...
That was quoted everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of our favourite managers in terms of someone representing your club saying, well, that's fine, we'll just deal with the pressure of winning all the time and you can do the losing. That kind of bravado, the fans really identified with that. How was he as a man manager, particularly through that cup campaign and into the final?
Yeah, he made sure that everyone knew their positions, everyone knew what to do. different scenarios. If we got a man sent off, if they went down to 10, if 1-1 at this stage of the game, it was all different scenarios. But he just drilled in was, if we play, we'll win. If we go out and do the things that we're good at, we'll win that game. As players, we were a little bit wary because they had Griffiths and O'Connor, who could do things that maybe in our team, we at the time where we were sort of struggling, didn't really, Griffiths could turn and put one in top corner after 60 minutes, and then we hit the post, we hit the bar. For players, maybe in the back of our minds, it was, we just didn't want to have one of those days where everything didn't go our way. But we knew we were prepared enough. We'd done everything well, correctly. If we went out and played the way that we could play and the way that we had shown in some games, not all games, that we would most likely win that game.
Which is pretty much how the fans were feeling. I think everyone, we can speak amongst ourselves,
could see,
acknowledged it.
Although they had Griffiths and O'Connor, I think the balance of the squad was more than Hearts' favour.
If you spoke to any Hearts fan, Hibs fan, they would probably say, yeah, we're underdogs, but their big hope was, we've got two players that could just do something, and then it could be our day of all days. And then any Hearts fan, if you would say to them, do you think you win? You think, yeah, if we play well, and if it's not one of those days that they do something like that. So I think in that sense, as players, we pretty much worked that out straight away, that there are positives and negatives. But you go back to the week before the cup final, they beat Dunfermline 3 or 4-0 at home, and we get spanked off Celtic 5-0.
And after you thought about that, and after you thought about that as well, and you were thinking, then they've got these dangerous players. What were you thinking when Gary O'Connor skied that ball over the bar midway through the first half? Did you just kind of laugh to yourself and go, oh, well, there's the dangerous players then?
No, well, I would have thought, unbelievable goal if he scored it. My big thing was the one where McPake clears it off the line from Suso.
Yeah. Should have been 3-0.
If that goes 3-0, that's... Yeah. But then they scored right at the end, 2-1. Half time. I don't think many Hearts fans at half time would have been too comfortable.
How big a thing, Ryan? You spoke about the quality from them coming in the form, in particular, two players, really. They were the threats to us. But over that 9 or 10 game unbeaten run that we were in at Derby's, I think, sadly, in the week leading up to that, while I was obsessing about how that final would turn out, I think I looked through those games and there was something like 14 different Hearts scorers in there. And as it played out in the final, obviously, three of our goal scorers, yourself, Darren Barr and Danny Granger, all by trade really defenders. How big was it in our team that our goals could come from anywhere? We had threats all over the park, because I think that actually still exists. We spoke about it last week a wee bit. I think that still goes for the Hearts and Hibs teams now. You look at Hibs and you say Malonga and Allen are really the threats. You look at Hearts and you say, well, anyone could score. How big a thing was that amongst the team, that it doesn't matter who scores a goal? Whereas for them, you felt did you feel if we cancel out O'Connor and Griffiths, that's it? That's the threat?
We thought. And then even still, we thought for 89 minutes we could handle those two pretty comfortably. We had a pretty strong back four at that time, which worked well. We had Jamie McDonald in goals. Darren Barr did a great job in front. So we sort of had 5 good, solid players to sort of handle 2, which, Paulo Sergio was just sort of like, that's your job. You just do that and let the footballers play. Let the footballers play football. And then we knew we had at the other end, we had Scatchell, Driver, Suso, Stephen Elliott that could cause them problems. So like I said, our big thing was just if we played to our capability and we nullified and didn't do anything crazy, didn't do anything stupid, just sort of kept it, calm as you can sort of be, that we would win that game.
At what point did you think that game was won? Was it the sending off, or was it when Danny tucked the penalty away after the sending off?
I don't know. I think maybe the penalty, but then my goal so soon after it, it sort of, I didn't even realise it was so close in the game. The game felt like it went for 3 hours, really, when I was out there.
Right. But your goal was the ultimate sucker punch in terms of just killing it completely stone dead. I
would have loved to have, or not loved, but to see it how it would have played out at 3-1, just to see how Hibs what they would have done and what we would have done. Whereas
if they still had a sniff of getting back in, you mean?
Because they a couple of years later against Falkirk, they showed that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
They still had those players that if it goes 3-1 and Griffiths turns around and puts one in the top corner, 3-2, all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, we can't lose this from being 3-1 up. It had a real sort of sense about that, but I think that Granger's goal scores and I score so quickly afterwards, it just absolutely kills it and makes probably the last 30 minutes is a bit of a stalemate, really.
That's what I was going to ask. There was it certainly seemed like there was a specific instruction to keep the ball, see it out that way. Don't pile on and go for 7, 8, 9, which potentially was a wee bit in contrast to what the fans were hoping for at that time, or some of them may be shouting for, despite being 5-1 up in a cup final. As Hearts supporters, we reserve the right never to be happy with anything, as we are demonstrating on a weekly basis right now at Tynecastle. Did that come from Paulo Sergio?
Yeah, a little bit. I think if you even watched the game back, he's sort of
you can see him talking to Andy
Yeah.
Driver, because I think he got Dockery booked about 2 minutes after the fourth goal. Driver skinned Dockery, and Dockery got booked, and you're thinking he's next, because Andy just had the better of him the whole game through.
It was unbelievable.
And my dad had saw Hearts get beat 7-0 for in the 70s, and my dad, I remember him looking almost stone faced at the end of the game, because he was like, that was the opportunity. And I think he always, as much as he loves Sergio for bringing the cup, I think he'll always look back at that and go, oh my god.
I think despite being 12 years away from being born, I kind of shared that to a certain extent, just that we could have done them a wee bit more, because we felt so superior in the last 20 minutes.
But then we just dominated that game. We just took the sting out of it. We kept the ball.
It wouldn't have helped with those pictures either. You'd never have been able to do the first
but then the other thing was, if we did go gung-ho, it leaves them opportunity.
Yeah.
And technically we just didn't give them any opportunities.
Well, that was the thing. I think you're right, and that's potentially a more continental approach to it. And at the end, you can say, well, we dominated the scoreline 5-1, but also we dominated the football. Look at those last 20 minutes. You didn't even touch it. Whereas here, we are more fixated potentially on but we could have scored 8.
Yeah, but then we could have conceded 2.
Exactly.
So as a defender, you'd rather win 5-1 than 7-2.
Well, 5-0 would have been better than conceded. But, do you know what I mean? And then also they were down to 10 men, and the whole occasion caught up to everyone as well. So we knew if we just kept the ball, there would be gaps that would open up towards the last 10-15 minutes that you could go and get a couple more.
Did you find fatigue setting in at the end of that game in terms of the amount of nervous energy that you had got rid of, or was the scoreline enough to keep it that you had energy in your legs throughout?
A little bit. I remember I sort of got... you could feel we had a cramp coming along right near the end, but then it just goes away.
You just want to hear that whistle.
Yeah, that sort of, it was almost a surreal moment, because you were just playing thinking, how good is it going to be tonight? How good is it going to be? And it's so strange to be thinking that in the middle of one of the biggest games I'm playing, but you were just like looking around, and you got to take it all in, I guess, just to see the fans.
That seemed to add to the atmosphere. There was times I was watching that game and almost forgetting the magnitude of the match. Yeah. And for some reason, that goal against Celtic, the Beattie goal, I still look back at that goal and think, I think I probably celebrated that goal more than I did at any point.
I definitely did.
Very disrespectful to me.
No, I definitely did. And there is the thing of that moment, that sometimes you look at that final and you think, in terms of the moment, the rush of blood, it almost would have been better to nick that 1-0 in the last minute from a fan's perspective, because you get that one moment of exactly, but you've got that one moment of realisation that we've done this, whereas that final was a really odd scenario, especially because we had 98 before, where we had been hanging on for the last 10-15 minutes, unbelievably so, and it was the relief when the final whistle went was something I've never experienced before, and I was only 11 at the time, never mind my dad, who was much older than me and had never seen us win anything. And then 2006 we won on penalties. There was never that was actually that thing of, we're going to throw this away. We're by far away the superior team, and we're going to be a laughingstock at the end of the season, despite everything we've achieved. This one is the first time we've ever won a trophy, certainly in my lifetime, and been able to sit with half an hour to go and say, we've won this cup. And because there was quite a weird reaction to it, because you didn't get that rush of blood at the final whistle. You got that, we've won it now, but we kind of knew we had won it 40 minutes ago. It was quite an odd scenario from a fan's perspective, because we were so dominant, and that was unexpected. I think everyone going into that game expected it to be a goal in it, a real struggle, because I think everyone expected both teams to be really edgy.
Yeah.
And as we say, Hearts weren't really at all. Was that...
Yeah, but all games are decided on key moments. There's so many moments during that game. You know, Ian Black's a very lucky boy. Early on. Then we sort of score the scrambled goal. O'Connor has those chances. There's so many moments in the games when you can look back and pick on and think. You know, when you look back on it, you're like, O'Connor probably shouldn't have scored that goal. You know, it would have been an unbelievable goal if he scored. Blackie could have been sent off, which would have changed it totally.
Completely. Yeah.
Darren Bart, could have been offside, or he could have skied it. He could have done so many things.
Or you could have got that shot away that you went for when you actually pressured it.
Everyone fell for it.
I wonder if he's worked on that.
He worked on that in training. But my goal, we actually worked on training.
Yeah.
And everyone before, Palisade was like, yeah, it's going to work. You know, we're going to get Scatchell to run from midfield and Danny Granger, which is quite a difficult ball to play in. And I remember at training, everyone like, just get it in the mixer. Don't worry about playing this, short corner. I'm not a fan of short corners. Just get it in, especially when we got so many good players in the air that we did. And it actually worked. So it shows you how much I know.
And going on that as well, talking about like how we were feeling, it's the weird things that I remember about that weekend. For instance, one stupidly being when there was another ball came on the pitch all of a sudden during the game, and Lee Griffiths booted it right towards where I was sitting. Like I was like 2 people away where it hit, and just little things like that. And on the way to the game, I was sitting in the train with my mates too, and I said to him, we're all nervous now, but we'll be laughing when Rudy Scatchell slams home the 5th. And that was my words. And that happened, and we just looked at each other, like just started laughing. We couldn't believe it actually happened. It was just the little things.
Right. Ryan, to wrap up on Hearts before we go into the other couple of bits and pieces we want to ask about, a few questions from Kickback. Suave Cav on Kickback wants to know, have you ever planned a goal celebration, or is it all just raw emotion? Have you ever,
I can say no.
I know. But have you ever had a celebration in mind and then got so excited at the time of scoring that the celebration's gone out the window?
Yeah, I've had so many. I've gone through, like every young kid does. I've wanted to do the whole, point to the back of your shirt, the McGowan. I wanted to just do sort of the Canton. I just stand there and enjoy it all in.
But the unbridled joy gets the better of you.
Yeah, but then I'm lucky enough that I've scored in my 3 Hearts goals. I've got one at Easter Road, one at Tynecastle, and one in a cup final. If you were to probably pick 3 goals to score, they would probably be your 3. In China, I scored probably a volley, which I'll probably never score again in my life, and that was probably the most subdued. I just gave it sort of the shearer. And then I scored in the last 10 seconds of a Chinese Cup final. So from my point of view, I've been very, very lucky in the goals that I've scored have been in key moments and have gave me memories that not many people would have.
If you could have chosen, if we could sit here right now and allow you to choose a celebration that you would be remembered for, an iconic celebration, would it be the kind of strange skip, slightly camp run that you do? Are you happy that is just yours now? Or
when you look like you were perfecting it at the St Johnstone game and stuff, because you were doing it a little bit.
It's just when you just run, you just want to jump, and you just want to.
When you look at it, you can just see it. It's just what happens. Your body, he's got no thought. It's just his body's doing it.
Yeah, you just.
It's one of those things again that we're going to mention in a moment that connects you with the fans, because it is like an over exuberant child. Like, I don't know quite what to do.
It's just because all my goals come in just like I would have loved to score against St Mirren at home.
And just be able to be cool.
Because I would have just
flick the collar up and
I would have just done sort of a normal celebration. But I just very lucky again to score in games and in moments which sort of you dream of scoring in.
Not only scoring but setting up brilliant goals, which we'll come on to, I can imagine.
The next season we're not going to touch on too much, but we are going to mention a couple of things about it. One in particular, Ryan Jarman brings up on Kickback. Gowser, the attacking midfielder. Whose idea was that? And were you sold on the idea, or did you have to be persuaded?
Yeah, I think the attacking midfielder sort of gets blown out of proportion. I was just the centre midfielder that was to try and... There was 3 of us at the time, so it was just one trying to get to support the striker. and another one, and one sits. But I was just, at the time, I was quite fit and could get up and sort of was trying to be the one that would go further than, I think it was Sutton at the time. But yeah, we were undefeated pre-season. It was kind of seemed to be working. You know, I was just loving that I was getting to play, run around, you know, do a different sort of dimension. I think the game that changed, it was Inverness at home with 2-0 up and we drew 2-2.
Yeah.
And I was sort of the one that was like, oh my God, why is he playing this position? But I honestly think if we had won that 2-0, everyone would have been like, oh, you know, it actually kind of worked. It, you know, gave us a bit of height in the midfield, a bit of tackle, a bit of bite. You know, he looks like an uncoordinated guy going forward, but he brings that different option and something that, you know, that we could sort of work with.
I think that season a lot of the fans were so underwhelmed by the appointment of John McGowan, and I think they were just looking for anything to pick at. And unfortunately for you, that was one of the things where maybe people that hadn't watched you play for the reserves didn't realise that you'd played in centre midfield before, and they've just
seemed out of left field.
Back playing there, and they've just jumped on it. Unfortunately,
before I ever played for the first team, I'd never played right back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if you had watched me in the reserves, you'd be thinking, well, what's he done playing right back?
Did you feel comfortable playing in midfield, or would you have rather, had you been given some influence on selection, would you have rather been at right back?
I probably would have preferred to play at right back because I think I would have performed better for the team at right back. But at the time, I knew I could do what the manager at the time wanted me. I knew I could do a kind of a job. It might not be a typical centre midfielders, you know, like you get different kinds of centre midfielders, but I knew I could be effective in the game at winning tackles, tracking runners, doing the sort of dirty side and letting you know, Jason Holt, who was sort of coming through, or attempts, you know, to sort of not worry about tracking back, and he always did that in front of me, but you know, just to get on the ball, and I would match his runner. I would, you know, for goal kicks, try and win the headers. You know, simple things, could go out wide for goal kicks for us to try and win it on. Just little things that in games, as a fan, sometimes you might not pick up or worry about. But I think at that time, John McGlynn's thing was we were so lightweight in the middle. I don't think Darren Barr was. He was still there. I'm not sure if he was injured or.
Darren was still there, but I think he was in and out the team with injury at the time.
I'm not sure if McGlynn fancied him at the time, and it was just a sort of, so we didn't have a midfield four of Templeton, Novakovic, Robertson and Holt.
Barr was playing in the centre defence, he was playing right back.
As well.
And then
right, it would have been like a beauty team in the midfield.
It would have been, and okay, football's not played by sizes, but it would have helped, and it does make a difference if you do have a little bit of height, because then teams can't bully you and push off pitch.
Certainly because John McGlynn plays a slightly more physical style at points as well, so it is necessary for that style. So there you go, Ryan Jarman on kickback. You have your answer. It was John McGlynn's idea, but Ryan was pretty happy to go along with it, take one for the team, so to speak.
Exactly.
I wasn't picking the team all the same.
Right, the final thing we're going to touch on of that season before we go into your departure and a couple more general questions about Hearts. Liverpool, that was some experience. What are your memories of that?
Yeah, I just remember, again, similar to sort of the Tottenham game, we thought we were going to get opportunities, we thought we were going to get chances during that game, and it would just be whether we could keep them. And we thought the longer it went on, Liverpool weren't doing that good at that stage of the season. We had sort of been hot and cold, but had been playing alright, and we just thought that we had players in positions. Temps was going through a real purple patch at that time and could cause them a lot of trouble, and Temps' goal goes down in history as probably one of the most celebrated, or for just pure, oh my God, we've scored. We could be taking Liverpool to extra time at Anfield. I think it was one of those moments where if you were there, you would remember for a long, long time. Did it feel like a real step forward amongst the squad because the damp squib that had happened against Tottenham previously, that we did properly compete there? I mean, for a moment there, Liverpool were panicked that there was a real shock coming there. Yeah, and I think it showed, obviously, Brendan Rodgers, how impressed he was with us at Tynecastle. But then he brings back Gerrard, Suarez, Carragher, brings back all these sort of big boys to play the second league, because I think he was sort of pleasantly surprised at how we performed at home, and like that.
And the nature of the goal as well, that we could see in Tynecastle, so
it was
so close.
Yeah, so it was one of those sort of they knew that they were going to be in a game and we'd give them a game. It was just a matter of us performing at that level. And again, we're unfortunate that they scored so late on, but for over the 2 games, you can't say that they dominated us too much or they deserve to go through any more than we did.
Given the financial situation at the club at the time and how up in the air things had been for such a prolonged period of time, was that seen amongst the players, although not put out there publicly, was that seen amongst the players as a real opportunity to get some exposure and potentially win your next move that way?
Yeah, in a way. But then I think every game is like that. You never know who's going to be watching. You could get... all it takes is for someone to sort of think, oh, he played well today, I'm going to tell this guy, who tells this guy, who tells... That's how sort of football works. Or it only takes one guy, one manager to like you and take you everywhere, and your career can fly. So as players, we see it as every game. But Liverpool at Anfield, I'm sure it was on live on TV.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that add to that sort of a special occasion.
Final couple of questions on Hearts then, again from Kickback. Jam Boozy asks, do you miss Tynecastle?
Yeah, of course. I get asked that all the time. I think you ask anybody that plays in Scotland that's played at Tynecastle, they like Tynecastle. They like Easter Road, they like Ibrox, so they're probably the 4 stadiums that you like playing. But obviously my connection's a bit more stronger because every second week I was lucky enough to run out and play in such a great environment and great stadium. So yeah, I do miss it. Okay,
Jam Tartan 74 wants to know who's the best player and best manager that you played with or under during your time at Hearts.
It's been a few managers. That's difficult. First team managers Paulo Sergio was probably the only one that was sort of... Darren Murray was probably the best coach out of Hearts,
right.
19's coach. He's the reason why all these young boys now are blossoming, and the ones previous, he'd be the big... if you asked any of them who their sort of best coach would be, I bet 9 out of 10 of them would have said him.
Mm-hmm. And player? You tried to sidestep that one there, subtly.
At Hearts, for sheer ability, probably Temps.
I knew he was going to say that.
Because I come through the youth, I've seen him do things in training where you're just like, how did he just do that? For games, for moments, for goals, probably Scatchell's up there. Just for, he doesn't do anything for like 70 minutes. And half of you's thinking, what is he doing out there? And then he just scores, and you're like, alright, that's what he does. But as a defender, Webster, I thought Webster was outstanding for me. Coming into that team, he was the guy next to me, and he helped me in so many games, so many occasions, and not only on the field but off the field, on really helping me out and sort of taking me on the win. So probably those.
Right, on to the departure then, as we start to try and wrap things up for you, because we've gone much further than we even promised in the last break. Right, August 2012, straight after the Liverpool game at Anfield, there started to be some rumblings while a lot of us were still down there, hadn't even made our way up the road yet, that there was some business going down on deadline day, as it was. What can you tell us about what went on that day into the interest in yourself from Rangers?
I almost missed it all. I went for a nap. I swear to God, I got back to Edinburgh probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe even 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I went for a sleep, woke up at 4, had about 7, 8 missed calls from a couple from my agent, a couple from people at the club. I was thinking, what's going on here? Made a couple of phone calls, and it was Hearts have accepted a bid. Pretty much, you can go speak to Rangers. And I said, well, I told my agent at the time, what's my options here? I don't particularly want to go. Can I say no? He says, yeah, you can, but that's up to you. The Hearts have said that they've accepted the bid. That's your ticket to leave Tynecastle. And I said, no, well, I want to stay. So made phone calls, thought that was it. Another phone call, they've upped their bid. Hearts have accepted it again. You can go. You sort of should go through. And then Ali McCoy called me. He had said, we're really keen for you to go. Could you come and meet me? So I was going to meet him at Hart Hill services. I'm letting you know a few details here.
Transfer deal.
Yeah, it was going to meet him at Hart Hill, but then I was halfway through and I said, he was running a bit late, where I said, I'll just come to Murray Park. But I told him before I wasn't going to sign, but he was just trying to persuade me. He wanted me to show the facilities. Went down. Again, as soon as I seen him, I said, I've just come here to face to face to sort of explain my situation. We had a discussion, and he was very, as everyone knows, he's a great guy and a pleasant guy, and
we like him.
He understood my situation and my sort of dilemma at that time, and totally understood it. And I left there, probably maybe enhanced my reputation with him than maybe before I left, because you got to sort of know what kind of person I am and stuff like that. But and I think that's about it. It's sort of awkward to say, but
certainly dodged a bullet.
Yeah. So there's two.
Ever any discussion that Rangers would come back in for you at a later stage? Because
Chick Young led with an exclusive
there seem to be a couple of pundits that seem to be in the know that it's not happening now, but a year down the line, then it will happen.
I think the big thing was because it was the transfer embargo. Yeah, they had that. So the next window was out of it, and then at that stage, everyone knew that Hearts' financial problems were struggling. So I think they were just putting two and two together. He'll go somewhere, and then if he wants to come back to the UK, that will be where he goes. But there was no agreement or no. I've read stuff pre-contracts, and there was nothing like that.
Right, there's two things I'd like to ask out of what you said there, Ryan. Firstly, was there any conversations with anyone representing Hearts in terms of putting pressure on you to move because of the financial situation at the club?
Yeah, I was put under huge pressure to leave at that time. I was kind of told that we really need the money at the stage, that if you didn't go then, or it was the last day, you would go in January, because they seen me as one of their biggest assets. I then had other people telling me you need to be very careful, because players previously have then been told you're not playing until so and so. So I had in 4 hours huge decisions to make it on my future. I was getting a 3-hour window to make a decision on the next 4 years, 3 years, 5 years of my career, and I was going from being on X amount of money to being on ×7, ×8. I was 22 at the time. I would challenge, I'm not bigging myself up here, but I would challenge any 22-year-old.
We'll do it for you, don't worry.
I'd challenge any 22-year-old in a position to say go there for 6, 7, 8 times the amount of your money, and say no to that.
On that then, what were the reasons that you did say no?
For one, I thought it was a panic buy by Rangers. I wasn't sure if they really wanted me. I think if they really wanted me, then my question to a few people was, why am I only hearing this 3 hours before transfer deadline day? And the other was I just broke into the international team. I didn't see going down to the 3rd division as any sort of big positive. I wasn't influenced by the size of club. My big thing was I just sort of established myself as I seen at a club that I didn't want to leave. I was well regarded at Hearts. I was enjoying my time there. I loved Edinburgh. I wasn't ready to move to Glasgow to do all the stuff that comes with the transfer. There was so many, and it was all a little bit rushed, and I just didn't feel right. When I first heard it, my gut instinct said, "Nah, it doesn't sound right." And that's no disrespect to Rangers as a club, and it's not to say that if circumstances were different, then you never know. But at that time, in those circumstances, I made the decision that it wasn't for me.
Did you get a chance to speak to Temps during the time that, you know, they were obviously speaking to you and him? Did you guys get a chance to speak to each other about what was going on?
Well, I remember that tweet you put out of you think you tied him to a chair at one point. You said he's not going anywhere.
That was the transfer window before.
Oh, was that?
So that was, yeah, but I did. But then he had his own reasonings behind it. And we were both told if we said no and we came back that they couldn't guarantee that we'd play.
Final question on that then, Brian, from Gershwin on Kickback. What do you make of Temps's career progression since that moment?
I get asked this all. It's very difficult to say. You know what I mean? And then let's see, I don't like bad mouthing Hearts or anything like that, but I think they could have handled that situation so much better. You know, they came out and said that Temps wanted to leave. Temps didn't want to leave. He was told to leave. Same as I was told to leave. But Temps is from Glasgow. You know, he had a family. He had people to look after. He had his own motives. You'd have to ask him on why he moved. But I don't think anyone at Hearts, after the way they treated us that day, should then come out and badmouth us. Because I can know for a fact, if David Templeton didn't leave that day, we wouldn't have a Hearts football club now. And I think a lot of people get muddled up and get different perspectives on what happened.
As someone taking it to purely footballing perspective, then taking all that, you know, the emotion out of it, as someone who knows Temps really well and obviously clearly highly rates him, are you disappointed at the lack of football that he's getting at the moment?
Again, it's difficult. I now not look at Temps as a footballer or Ian Black or Darren Barr or Rudy Scatchell. They're my friends, so I look at it only at them as a friendly advice. Yeah, he'll probably want to be playing more than he is, but you know, there'll be factors on why he's not playing. There'll be decisions, there'll be things that he's doing or not doing. There's so many things on why a player's not playing that I'm not privy to, or anyone sort of outside of Rangers are privy to. Do I think he should be playing? Well, I think, yeah, definitely. I think he could be playing it week in, week out. And I think he would do well if he was playing, but that's not my call or my decision to make.
Cool. Well, thank you for answering it nonetheless. On to the move that did come about then to China. How did that all happen? Why China?
Well, they're the sort of team that wanted me. They wanted me the previous couple of windows, but Hearts had said no. And then it was still sort of ringing in my ear. After, when I came back from, I said no to Rangers, and on the way back up, it must have been 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from the club. Can you come to Tynecastle? We want you to sign a new deal. 1:30 in the morning. We just come back from Liverpool. I was like, come on, you guys. I'm in at training tomorrow 9:30. And I had said to him, I wanted to sign a new deal. I was comfortable. I knew that if I signed a new deal, they'd get more money.
Okay.
You know, I was confident enough that I'd get a move. You know, I wasn't going to rest on my laurels. I think everyone at the club knew what kind of person I was.
Yeah.
And they were a little humming and hawing a little bit for the next couple of weeks, which I found strange because at 1:30 the previous morning they wanted me to drive to Tynecastle. So there were so many strange things, and then they'd said, you know, next window you're gone pretty much anyway. So then I was thinking, is it really so much hassle of going through a brand new contract or working out all the little details to then in 3 months' time be leaving? So then I sort of had to put the selfish head on and realise that it's a business. It's not there's no loyalty in football anymore. So I had to look out for numero uno and then make the decision on you know, what options were going to be best for me. Again, I didn't really get any options. Shandong were the team that was going to pay the most money, which Hearts were going to accept. Again, I think there would have been big problems if I accepted I could have signed a pre-contract with a team down south or with other teams, but would have I played the last 6 months of my Hearts career?
I mean, a massive point is closer to your family, I suppose, as well. So
yeah, and then the other thing was it was a new experience for me. You know, they were a big club, they wanted me, which was a big thing as a footballer. They were paying Hearts good money, so then they couldn't, you know, badmouth me when I left. I guess.
Kind of ticked all the boxes for you to an
they were
extent.
going to play in the Champions League. They had a great coach in Radic Antic. Had good players. It was just a new challenge, something that excited me. And a lot of people were like, oh, you went all the way to China. I say, well, when I was 16 and a half, I went from LA to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
That was a harder decision than that one was. I was 23. I'd grown up. I was a man. I could handle the move more than I could when I was 17.
Was this one a more drastic cultural change, though, fitting into China?
A little bit. The language was the barrier when I came. So yeah, but it was. But
Have you picked the language up? Can you give us a sentence?
I think it would have been worse here, to be fair, to pick up the language than China.
Yeah, it was difficult. But then I was going to, again, it was a totally different situation. I was going into Shandong as a first team player, straight into the first team. So,
Yeah.
I've got a driver, a translator, a flat, an apartment, a car. They got everything. Do you know what I mean? I've gone into a club where I have to do a lot of stuff at Hearts because I was such a young boy, to a place where everything was sorted out for me. So it made the move and the culture shock a lot easier.
Was there a huge difference playing over there to play in Edinburgh? Edinburgh is it's a big city in some respects, but it's quite small in others. And did you notice that you could blend, you could go away from the football side of things and enjoy, going out to a restaurant and maybe not getting sort of hassled by a fan? Was there anything like that over there, or was it quite different to what was happening in Edinburgh?
Yeah, no, I still get recognised a fair bit in Shandong. My partner Laura's got bright blonde hair, so she sort of sticks out when we're walking the streets. But people forget how big China is and how much football's growing.
Yeah,
football's growing massively over there. We average probably between 30 to 35,000 home games. If it's a big game or a derby, we're looking at 50 odd. We'll play 6 teams in the league who will be the same as us. Well over 30,000. I think the average for this year's attendance was 25. Now, it's obviously not all about fans, but they do have a lot more billion people than Scotland does. But you're on the radios, the TVs, not me personally, but the club, and that's very well publicised, and it's it could really take off. And the facilities, if anyone could get an opportunity to see the facilities that we have, I would say, and I'll go out on a limb, that they're the best in Europe, best in the UK, and would challenge anyone in Europe.
Interesting, because I think there's still a perception amongst fans that places like China are potentially a bit of a footballing backwater, and in actual fact, complete opposite of that.
And then again, I go to Australia and everyone's like, "Oh, Scotland, that wouldn't have been the best, would it?" And you're like, "Oh, it was amazing, I loved it." And they're like, but it's Stone Age football." No, everyone tries to play football. And they're like, and then I come here in Scotland. And they're like, Australia? What kind of league's that? Or China? You know what I mean? So I think everywhere you go, you sort of have to... A lot of people don't really... They're making judgments on something they don't know. My favourite thing is, someone says, China's a bit of a backwater. I say, well, name me 3 teams. Do you mean, how can you make a judgment on a league when you can't name 3 teams?
Yes, I'm pretty sure you were still on Football Manager, so it can't be that bad. Right, final question on China. You still seem to stay pretty well in touch with Hearts when you were in China, certainly tweeting a lot. How did you manage it in China? Because we like to think of ourselves, as you say, as a pretty massive club, but even in Scotland we're not that well represented in terms of media coverage and stuff. How did you keep in touch with it?
Well, I spent 8 years in Edinburgh, so I've got a lot of friends who are Hearts fans. I had Dylan for the next year. Even now I'm back purely to see all my friends and people that I've made like I said, I'm 17 to 24. You make a lot of friends in those age gaps. So I have a lot of people to see and a lot of people that I'll have friendships for the rest of my life. So and a lot of them are Hearts fans or Hearts orientated or live in Edinburgh. So I check my Twitter or I check my Facebook and I can find out the Hearts scores or who's playing. And not so much this season, obviously I know a lot of the boys that play, but a lot of them were really young when I was sort of leaving. It would only maybe be Danny Wilson, I know, Jason Holt, and a couple of the young boys. Callum Patterson was breaking through as I was leaving, Kevin McCaddy. There was a lot of boys. Sam Nicholson was really young when he first came in. so that I know, but I wouldn't have a relationship as such as a player was previous.
But it's got to be a strong relationship that you have with the people in Edinburgh to bring you back here for Christmas rather than Adelaide, I suppose.
Then that comes back to the partner. The partner plays a big role in
there we go.
what happens. Yeah.
At least you're in the right place for New Year, though, I suppose. You can't beat that.
Try to get a derby in.
Right, final thing before we wrap up, Ryan. You can spend as long as you want on this. If you want to give us one-word answers, it's absolutely fine. Australia. How weird was it to make your debut at Easter Road?
Yeah, again, it's just one of those things in football that I'm a very, very lucky boy, and things just seem to have worked out in certain games and certain situations. It's the first squad I'd ever been involved in.
Do you think your debut would have come at that point had it not been for the logistical thing of you live right across the city?
Yeah, because I was on standby for the 2 previous squads,
right?
So I knew I was in and around it.
Yeah.
But then I do think it helped that I was in Edinburgh, and it helped because at that time we had a lot of senior players who played in Qatar or Tim Kay, who was at MLS, who were out of season. So there wasn't many European players playing week in, week out in the sort of Australian squad at that time. And so that did help me in, and then to get the last 10-15 minutes. But then again, this just goes back to showing you sort of, not bad-mouthing Australians, of course I wouldn't, but when I came on and everyone sort of booed and things like that, the Australian was like, why are you getting I had players like, what happened? And I says, that's, I play for Hearts and that's their right. I'm like, yeah, but it's a Scotland, Australia. Come on, mate.
Yeah.
I would have been
Is that
disappointed.
the game that even Ian Black got booed on?
Yeah.
Because he played. Yeah, he came on for Scotland that night, and
and then so that sort of helped me out, saying, he's my teammate. So. He got booed as well.
Right, on to the big one with Australia then. How did you find Brazil?
Yeah, it was an amazing, amazing experience, and something that, a lot of very, very good players have never played in the World Cup, and I'm a very, very lucky boy to have experienced it. And again, the way things worked out was I was probably going there as a reserve, as a second choice for a couple of positions, and unfortunately enough for our right back, he got injured in the first game. It was a window that opened up for me, and it was a great moment for me. And it goes back to all those sacrifices I made. It's really good to when I do hang up the boots, I can look back and count my lucky stars that I've done and played in so many big games.
Right, now there are 3 particular moments to focus on the World Cup. 2 from a Hearts perspective. We'll go with the non-Hearts one first. The assist for the goal. What we've all seen your commentary, I think, of it, or your multiple takes of commentary. But whose idea was that to get you guys to record the commentary?
We're quite friendly with the little guy that does all the media stuff, and he just originally it was everybody in the team did it,
right?
But we sort of just took it too far, and they ended up just sort of cutting everybody out because they all just sort of were taking it a little bit serious. But
media trained,
as maybe guess that's sort of. I think there should be a bit of banter. The other thing was we were stuck in camp for 5-6 weeks, so it was bouncing off the walls, and it was just it sort of went down well for the Australian public, and it's just a bit of a laugh at the end of the day.
You've spoken about, obviously at first your bravado was about how amazing the ball was, and since you've said about how Tim just turned it into something out of nothing, how grateful are you that he came up with that moment of quality and that you'll be linked to that moment forever?
Yeah. I'll be forever grateful of what he did. I think if you were to play that in real time and pause it, when it's 10 metres away from him, you'd just be like, it looks over here. Which it does. He's probably going to take a touch. It might not be a good touch. He'll go out for a goal kick, and I've pretty much just kicked it out of play. But then he just does that, and then everyone was like, then it wasn't a ball that everyone was like, "Wow, ball! What a ball!" It was then people went, "Oh, he passed that ball." And he's made my assist, you can call it, 100 times better than it actually was.
My favourite goal of the World Cup, obviously. Absolutely.
He says with a raging look on his face.
Well, I say that from what Cahill done there, I think that was harder than what James had to do, because he set himself up for what he done. Cahill had like, how many seconds did he have to react to that?
You're biased, Ross.
I'm biased, yes.
You're biased.
We'll get over that.
But then I think it makes the ball better because obviously I was thinking to tap it in.
Yeah.
Right, the two Hearts moments. I'm going to go with the less likely first. The shirt swap with Maurizio Pinilla. Was that always your intention? Was that premeditated?
He recognised me before the game,
Right.
which I didn't think he would have, because he was. But then again, when you look back, he spent more times with 19s probably than the first team because of what he was doing. But yeah, I didn't think he was going to recognise me. He recognised me, and he doesn't speak that well of English, but he had a conversation, you could call it, sort of, broken English.
Many screenshots swapped amongst Hearts fans that day. It was.
And then he just sort of said, because I wasn't sure if he was going to play, or I didn't even think I was going to play. Then I came on, he came on, and I just caught. And then he's number 9, which is good for the wall. So there's so many things that it's just sort of worked out for me.
Were you aware of the kind of interest and, to put it bluntly, how proud Hearts fans were to see themselves, or feel themselves represented on that stage? But two Hearts players battling it out on the biggest stage of them all.
A little bit. Like, my Twitter feed was going pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And probably selfishly, I thought it was everyone saying, "Oh, congratulations! You came on and well done. We're proud of you." And it was all just the photos.
Yeah.
So I was a bit like, oh well. I didn't realise that would have been the big sort of thing at the time. I wouldn't have.
You seem to be a big sort of general trivia moment for like the English commentators. I think apart from sort of Cahill and one or two others, you seem to be somebody, because of your time spent at Hearts, they could associate with that. And there was obviously lots of references to playing against Hibs and everything. It was weird.
Yeah, it was.
Which we as supporters love.
Mentioned so many times by an English commentator.
Yeah.
It was just mad to hear it. And I think that that, amongst with all other reasons, was why everyone was so obviously proud to see you play and play well. It must be added, you did play well, to be fair. It was great to see.
But the supporters love it because it sets our club out. I mean, if nothing else, it is banter for that. Oh, I didn't really hear Hibs getting mentioned, or if they did, it was about getting beat in the cup final, and it's just that extra wee bonus for that.
Big Rono was looking in the future, didn't he? He did promise that it'd be 2-1. That was all over my Twitter. It's a bit late, mate.
Okay, final thing. How many times did you do a 5-1 to make sure it was caught at least once?
I only did it that once.
Why did you do it in such a strange way behind your back?
Originally, it's because there's 6 in the wall for the
right.
So I've watched it back on TV. Before, I'm standing there and I'm shouting 6, but obviously you can't hear. So the goalie goes like 6, holds up his hands at 6. And somewhere in my head, I just
wait a minute.
For everyone listening, that was the most mischievous look that went over Ryan's face.
So then I just sort of thought I'll turn around, and then I seen myself on the big screen up on the top, and I just thought, well, and then again, it wasn't like afterwards I was getting all these from Hibs fans, like, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have done this. In no way was that to get at the Hibs fans. I don't see 5-1. The Hibs fans might see it differently. I don't see that if I do a 5-1 as, get it up the Hibs fans. I see that as an amazing moment for Hearts fans to celebrate, to remember, to enjoy. And since I left Hearts and when it looked like I was getting into the World Cup squad, there's no word of a lie. I probably had 15 people a day saying, you got to do a 5-1. Even from the bench, if you're on the bench and you run on, you do something. So for all these moments, like I said before, these different kind of moments to happen.
And I think you can imagine every small Hearts fan, every child that day, going into school the next again day and just having that biggest smile on their face that was on TV on the World Cup, and obviously having a go at their Hibs pals as well.
Well, we've seen that, everyone's seen the thread on Kickback, and there's been books and everything published out now, the 5-1 all around the world. And that one, your one kind of just capped it off, In a footballing sense, you're not going to get better than at the World Cup. Unless you were fortunate enough to make the World Cup final, it's not going to get any better than that.
Standing forward. But then again, it was like, the situation was, didn't go into that game or any time in those games thinking, I want to be here, I'm going to get it.
The moment just arrived.
Yeah, I'm playing for a World Cup. And if there was 4 men in the wall, it would have never happened. It was just one of those things that happened, and
stars aligned again.
Yeah.
Were you happy with your performances in the World Cup? To be slightly more serious.
But overall, probably not. We got beat every game. I think we were the lowest ranked team.
What about you as an individual going in thinking you might not get a minute on the park?
Yeah, on that side, I was delighted. Obviously, I made 3 appearances. Started 2, got to play against some of the best players in the world, really. So from that perspective, you're like, yeah, that's great. But then there's always that bit of you that's like, I could have done better at this, could have done better at that, if I did this better. So I think the moment you start resting on your laurels is you're going backwards. So, obviously I was delighted for all that stuff to happen, but I think overall I could have maybe performed a little bit better in those games.
Okay, well, all that's left, Ryan, is to thank you for your time, certainly. I mean, this is the longest interview we've ever done by a clear hour, I would say. And I think it's
to anyone that had to listen to all of that.
I think on the podcast we'll split it in 2 definitely.
Gary Halliday's actually got in touch with that Foundation Hearts board member, and he's wanted to personally thank you as well for everything that you've done for them in the early stages. So he got in touch with me personally. So he says thanks.
No problem.
So we always like to leave our guests with a difficult question. Your difficult question is slightly different than we've asked anyone else because we've not had too many current players on. Your difficult question is, what does the future hold for Ryan McGowan?
You need to speak in the third person as well.
Yeah, imagine you're in the NBA.
Well, that Ryan McGowan kid's he's struggling for a move. I don't know. I really don't know.
What's your contractual situation in China? They've got an option of another year, but you're not sure yet. Is that right?
Yeah, we're still sort of waiting to hear word. As far as I'm aware, I'm going back. But then, like I was saying before, it's a business. I might be told, I'm not needed, or I'm needed to be moved on. And then, everyone goes, "Oh, where are you going to go to next?" Well, I'm going to go to the place where someone offers me a contract. I'd love to go play for Man U. I'd love to, go do this, go do that, go play in beautiful countries and beautiful cities. But I'm not up to that standard where I can pick and choose where I want to go. I'm going to go to a club who offers me a contract and works well with me. I might be lucky enough I get 3 contracts and I get to pick, what option sort of suits me. I might have only 1 contract and then sort of have to make that move there. But
you mentioned that before you moved to Shandong, they pursued you for a number of transfer windows. Are you aware at the moment, is there any interest? Are there any clubs that you've been hearing, persistent interest from at all?
Not particularly, because I just say to my agent, just tell me when it's something serious to happen. There's no point saying, so and so is interested, because it makes no difference, because there's so many things that have to work out before I should even be pulled into that. So that's his job, and so that's what sort of leave him to his devices. I trust that he's doing the right things, and he knows what I want to do and where ideally I'd like to go, and then we work it out from there.
The stock answer to that question nowadays for footballers tends to be England. Is that where you see your career leading to from China?
I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. I'd love to play in the Premier League, but that might not come about. I might not, club might come in, or club might fail, move might fail. Someone thinks not good enough. There's so many different options that have to be in place before that. I'd love to play in it. Is it something that I strive to do? Yeah, I probably strive to play at the highest level that I can play at. That might be in Scotland, it might be in China, it might be in a totally different league. I really have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to sneak one more question in, because we may as well. If you could give one note or pass on one bit of information to the current Hearts team, the youngsters that are there currently, I'm thinking particularly in terms of your relationship with the fans. What would that advice be that you would give? Is there any way to ensure that they have the same connection that you had with the fans? Because I think we're all agreed that, like you said, I think if you look at your Wikipedia article, it's something like 57 games that you played for Hearts. Your status within the support far exceeds 57 games.
It's 80 odd.
Well, that's maybe 57 league games.
Wikipedia.
No, Wikipedia is normally.
Maybe I just changed it there.
Wikipedia is not. That's normally league games, I think. So it's
Yeah.
maybe 57 league games. But your status with the fans far exceeds that. Now the cup final goes some way to account for that, but there is a connection there that goes beyond the time that you actually spent playing for the first team. Is there? You mentioned obviously the influences on you as a younger person and player and watching DVDs and things like that. Is there anything that the players can implement overnight or can have in their mind that will see, you know, maybe that fans will hold them in a higher regard or connect with them a wee bit more?
I just think we're the luckiest guys in the world. I don't care what anyone says. We are the luckiest people in the world. To wake up and get paid to play a game that you love and would wake up and play for free